The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. Story 1.
I agreed to a drug trial from a door-to-door salesman named Anura. This last week has been strange. The man with the pills came on Friday. I heard the knocks and began sneaking from my normal place, the lazy boy in front of my flat screen, towards the front room. I saw a short, round silhouette standing on the other side of the oval stained glass window of the front door. I waited for the shape to leave or knock again, but neither happened. I slid from the living room into the hallway and then against the wall. "Excuse me, sir, you are terribly hidden," the shape said. "If you would prefer me to come back another time, that can be arranged, but I would love to show you something first." "Who exactly are you? Some kind of salesman?" I couldn't believe I replied, but the professional tone and British accent drew me in. "Some kind of salesman, indeed," said the shape. "I've come to bring you what you need. You see, I know for certain I have. If you'd only open the door, I'll prove it to you. Come now, I can't stand here all day. Haven't you ever heard of catching more flies with honey?" I said, opening the door. Curiosity had gotten the better of me. "Yes, as a matter of fact I have," said the salesman, "but I take it with a grain of salt. Flies will land on horse shit just as often." The man standing on my porch was funny looking, to say the least. If encouraged to be more descriptive, one would say he was unfortunate to look at. He had long, thin legs that went up to an abnormally round body. His arms were comparatively short, but thin as well. His hands were fat and had dimples on the knuckles. His head appeared to be connected directly to his shoulders. He was wearing a brown, three-piece suit. He had large hazel eyes and large bushy sideburns. He was holding a suitcase. I'll get right to it. "Mr. Treble, I have come to sell you something. It's not spot remover or a subscription to Reader's Digest. It's much more interesting." He sat the suitcase on the ground and unlatched the scuffed brass locks and quickly removed a glass vial. "This, my good man, is what you need. This diet pill will beef you up, burn fat, and give you the energy and concentration you need to succeed. This little pill will change your life." I looked at him for a moment in disbelief. This man, who I had never seen before, had the audacity to tell me what I needed. The salesman was right, though. This stranger had told me he had a cure for all of my specific problems. I admittedly am a bit chicken-legged and sort of rotund. I have been going through a creative block as well. I haven't really been able to make anything new for my clients. In fact, I was waiting on Jeannie to call me later that morning, expecting a new logo for a local appliance chain. Honestly, I've recently lost my energy and motivation to work, and apparently this miracle pill could fix it. Mark Ryan, my partner for nearly 15 years, had just brought up my lull in creativity last Thursday at our weekly meeting, or pit stop as we called it. "That's a look that I like to see," the salesman said. "My name is Mr. Anura, and no, I don't want your money." "Let's stop this mind-reading thing," I said. "I imagine you've been doing this for a while, and I'm sure there are common trends you're following. I'm not interested in any crazy drug that some door-to-door salesman is peddling out of his briefcase. Have a good day. Mr. Anura, I'm done here." I'll give you $5,000 if you try this drug for a week. He continued, if you take this bottle, finish the prescribed dosage, and live with the benefits for a week, I will pay you. He pulled a chewed stogie from his pocket, licked his lips, and bit down on it. What's the catch? I asked, watching the salesman chew his cigar. He laughed at my question, and for the first time, I thought I saw a neck. It ballooned out as he chortled. There isn't a catch. John, you sign a release that you'll be sure to read all of. You take the pills, and I bugger off. I come back in a week with a stack of cash for you, and I get to pick your brain. Let me know how you've been. John thought on it for a moment, and though that he couldn't possibly be dumb enough to fall for this, but that there would be no harm in looking over the release. As I read through the surprisingly thick release form, I arrived at a page with the header known side effects and felt my heartbeat speed up. This is where it all gets fucky, right? It's all been surprisingly agreeable, even the non-disclosure agreement. But here's where it all gets bad. I was very quickly relieved of those thoughts, as the side effects seemed to be quite mild, to me, anyway. Nausea, some sleeplessness, mild skin irritation. When I finally arrived at the page that contained a blank line for my signature, I looked up to the salesman for the first time in what had to have been 5 minutes. He was holding a pen in an outstretched hand, smiling. Agreeable, I imagine, Mr. Anura said, still smiling. What is you so convinced that I'm into this? Well, Anura said, still maintaining his smile, you don't appear to be a dumb man, and this is a pretty easy decision. You get a bunch of good stuff, including money. All you have to do is not talk about it, and deal with some rather small side effects. Suddenly it hit me that he'd been using my name throughout our entire conversation. How do you know my name? Excuse me. My name? You keep calling me by name. How do you know my name? I got a tip from a friend of yours. This isn't a chance meeting. John, Anura said, taking the stogie from his mouth. Your friend is trying to help you as much as I'm trying to help myself. Get you out of a rut. And of course, get me a check in my success column. Scratch my back. Yada, yada. And I would assume that you aren't going to say who threw me under the bus. You assume correctly. Mr. Treble. I sign. I take pills. And I get $5,000. No bullshit. No bullshit. Give me the pen. I walked back inside, bottle in hand. I gave it a small shake and read the note the salesman slipped me before walking off my porch. Don't hesitate to call me if anything of interest happens. Just follow these instructions, John, and get ready. This isn't snake oil. A. Take 1 pill by mouth 2 times per day until gone. Take with full glass of water. Do not take with empty stomach. Simple enough, I suppose, I said to myself. As I took the pill form, the bottle, and raised it to my mouth, my cell phone rang. Saved by the bell, I thought. Jeannie's name flashed on the caller ID. Heya, Jeannie. I was just about to call you. I've almost got that new logo done. I've just hit a couple snags. I'm going to send you something to... Mark is dead. His house burned down with him in it last night. Oh, I said, in a voice I didn't recognize. How? What happened? It looks like he fell asleep with a lit cigarette, Jeannie began, her voice hitching. He probably had one too many while watching the game and passed out. An image of Mark, with an empty 12-pack beside him, a lit Marlboro in his hand slowly burning down to the filter, flashed across my mind. Not unlikely. The Guardians had been playing hot and cold all season, and Mark often took his baseball-related frustrations out on his liver. John, Jeannie said, We are supposed to have a meeting with Olson Lumber today. Should I cancel? Yes, Jeannie. Of course. They'll understand. I can call Bill and tell him myself. Do Mark's parents know what happened? My head was spinning. I was on autopilot. I felt like I was pretending to be an adult. There was a pause. Then Jeannie seemed to snap back to it. Yeah, I called them first. Deputy Brahm called me as soon as he got there with the fire department. There was a strange echo to everything that she was saying to me. The phone felt as though it weighed 1,000 pounds, and my legs were giving out. Okay, I'm going to go now. All right? I hung up before she could respond. I looked down at the pill, which I'd placed on the counter when my phone rang, and took it. I drank my glass of water, but I couldn't be paid to give a shit about my empty stomach. I walked around my kitchen island for a little while, thinking about what my life looked like now, how I was going to run a business. Was I going to run a business? Mark did every damn thing. He took care of the books. He talked to the clients. He found the clients, for God's sake. All I did was draw pictures. Draw the damn pictures. I went to my computer and shook it awake with the mouse and got to work. I finished a logo in one pass. It was original. It was cool. It was complete. Anyone would happily pay money for it. I decided to finish up a presentation that I'd put off for a potential client that Mark was going to meet with tomorrow. Honestly, he could sell ice to a snowman, but this shit was gold. I looked down at the clock on my monitor and it read 8:45 p.m. 4 straight hours of work was a rare commodity in the life of a blocked artist. I needed to tell Mark that I pulled through, and we were going to bag this thing. Mark is fucking gone, I said to an empty house. Every single memory I had with Mark hit me like a brick. Move-in day at Ohio University, graduation, the day we opened Ryan and Treble Marketing Agency, the day that Jeannie and Mark were married. I had stood in front of an assembly of mutual friends and given a poorly planned, alcohol-aided, best man speech. Everyone seemed to cringe or look away, but Mark listened through the whole deal and even shed a tear or two. The day that Jeannie and Mark's divorce was finalized, we sat on my porch and killed a case of Miller Lite and listened to Cleveland lose Game 7 of the 2016 World Series. I looked at my phone for a while, then went and laid down. The thought of calling Mark and him not answering was too much. I woke up at 7:25, 5 minutes before my alarm. I'd had a dream that I was tangled in a net. I felt the hemp rope digging into my arms and my neck. It was even between my toes. After shaking the dream, I felt surprisingly okay. Losing people, sad as it is, becomes more normal the older you get. It sucks. God does it suck. But it gets livable. On top of feeling okay emotionally, I felt okay physically. More than okay. Actually, I decided to roll with it. Waste not, want not. Time to take a pill. Tsk, tsk, tsk. Johnny boy, can't take these on an empty stomach, I thought, and made myself a big breakfast. I hadn't had an appetite like this in a while and chalked it up to eating my emotions. I sat down to my chow and checked my Facebook feed. Mark's picture was goddamned everywhere. Tons of phony people came from the woodwork. It seemed. College friends I didn't remember. High school friends who may have well never existed. Memories shared. Pictures posted. Who needs an obit when you have a Facebook? As I scrolled, I cried. As I cried, I ate. I finally put my phone down and turned on the small TV on the kitchen counter. I flipped channels for a while and kept on eating. When I looked away from the TV, I got back on my phone. I was fidgeting. I'm wired, I said to myself. I'm goddamn wired. I knew it was the pill, but didn't much care. This felt pretty okay. Maybe I'm just taking speed, Adderall or something like it. I thought, oh well, I'll probably need the energy. I popped pill number 2. Energy I had in spades. I decided to put it to good use. The calls were taken care of. The not-so-fun our business partner has died kind of calls. After letting the client base of T&R marketing know that he was gone, and that business stuff would be secondary for a while, I got to work on the house. It was a dump. In my rut, I had let chores get away from me. I did my dishes. I did laundry. I started to clean the damn walls. Then the first of the listed side effects started. The itching. It was barely noticeable at first, but it turned into a fire in my forearms. I dug at it until I nearly drew blood, and then decided to take a shower. When I hopped out, dried off, and got dressed, the cleaning continued. When I was cleaning the bathroom tile grout with an old toothbrush, I decided it had to be speed. This is also when I saw the first bug. It wasn't giant or alien looking, but it was gross. It was a worm, but a not so normal worm. A fucking silverfish? I thought out loud. No, I don't even know what a silverfish is, but this can't be it. It wasn't silver, for one, and it looked very similar to one of those mealworms that they feed to lizards. This one, however, was a bit bigger, fatter. To be specific, it's palpitating, beige body, had ridges around it. It didn't appear to be hard, and smooth, like the mealworms either. This creature looked fleshy and damp. "Fuck you, fella," I said, while crushing it with the handle of the toothbrush. There was an audible squelch, then a ribbon of bright red blood came shooting out of what I believed to be its head. I cleaned up and went on with my chores. I finished cleaning the windows in the house and decided it was good enough, mainly because I had caught up on everything. I was still wired though, so I decided it was time for a run. I ran through town, around the square, and back. This had done nothing for my energy level, still through the roof, but it had given me hunger pangs. I made myself 3 turkey and cheese sandwiches, stacked high with lettuce and tomato. I stood in the kitchen sweating from the run, zoned out, and devouring my food. I was resigned to the energy now. I didn't want it to go. It was carrying me through the loss of Mark. The energy stayed, and watching some TV in my recliner was out of the question. I was vibrating. I decided to sit down at my desk and do some work. A small ad agency with one graphic designer was frequently backlogged with commissions. Miraculously, with the help of the pill, I busted out 7 original designs and finished up a website. After a mad dash through my emails, finishing our commissions, and even replying to the occasional "sorry for your loss" Facebook message, I sat back and looked around. A spotless house, a clear inbox. I leaned back in my chair and let my eyes close. Sleep came at me quickly. After my eyes were shut, clouds of deep blues and purples began to fill my mind. Inky blackness reached around my brain and gripped it tightly. I was gone. I woke up to loud banging on my door. I jumped from my chair and peeked into the hallway and stared at the stained glass window on the door. Something was leaning against it, moaning. "John," it croaked. I was frozen. The figure suddenly dropped out of sight. Then a hand slammed against the glass. I acted before I could think. "Hey," I cried. "Get the fuck away from my door!" The hand sunk slowly. Then the figure appeared behind the glass again and proceeded to bang on the door. Sounded like the palm of a hand rather than a balled-up fist. "John!" the voice yelled. I recognized it now. It was Jeannie, but she sounded off. I rushed for the door. When I opened it, the smell of booze hit me hard. Jeannie was shithoused drunk. "Ah, Jeannie, what the hell are you doing? Get inside." I pulled her in and sat her in the dining chair he kept in the hall, and she slumped. "He'd be mad. You know," she said matter-of-factly. "He'd be mad that I got drunk without him. I never would drink with him, and it drove him nuts." "Well," I said, sliding down the wall until my ass hit the floor, I feel right now that I should have done less of it with him. I think maybe he drank too much. He would have just had yours for you, she said. Looking at me, she smiled, and I smiled. She then let out a tremendous burp. That sounded like it had some body to it. Are you gonna barf? She looked at me blankly and said, I'm fine. Why are you digging at yourself? You ever heard of soap and water, Johnny boy? She laughed, and then scrambled down the hallway to the bathroom, and after hearing the toilet seat slam against the tank, I heard her begin to retch. I noticed the scratches up my forearms and on my exposed calves. I'd been scratching at myself without even noticing it. Oh my God, that's gross. Jeannie called from the bathroom. Listen, I don't need to hear about how gross it is. Please just clean it up. You wouldn't believe it, but I just cleaned. Not me, you asshole. These worms. What's with all these fucking worms? I made for the bathroom to see what she was talking about, but had a feeling I knew what would be there. As I walked in, Jeannie stepped down from the rim of the tub, pointing at the toilet bowl. There, across the tank, the lid, and the floor were dozens of replicas of the worm from earlier. Yeah, I said, grabbing a roll of toilet paper from under the sink, getting to work scooping the worms into the toilet. I saw one of these guys earlier, thought it was a one-off, but here we are. Jeannie washed her face at the sink and grabbed a towel from the rack and screamed. The towel had a handful of the same, undulating worms. John, these are screw worms. Why the hell do you have screw worms? I have no idea what a screw worm is, for one, and for two, I don't know. They just showed up today. This morning, actually. It was just one though. I didn't know that I was infested with these little shits. Well, it's strange. Screw worms are little parasites, usually hang out inside cows before turning into flies. I have zero idea how you would have screw worms en masse hanging out around your house. Well, me either. I'm sorry to go farm girl on you, but that's gross. I'm a little more sober now, and I think I should go. Yeah? Yeah. I don't know why I came over here in the first place. I don't know if I should be here anyway. I don't really know what to think right now. We looked at each other for a long time before she showed herself out. I cleaned up the bugs but kept one in an old film canister I found at my desk. Anura had asked me to tell him if anything of interest happened, and this was pretty damn interesting. When I get up tomorrow, I'm going to give this guy a ring. I'm also going to look at some exterminators. The itching is getting absolutely horrendous. I can feel it in the palms of my hands now. I'll keep you guys posted as to what happens moving forward, but I'm fucking exhausted.
Story 2.
Bridgehead. When I was 12, I saved a boy in my class from drowning. I was walking home from school with my dad after a ballet rehearsal that had dragged on. It was winter and dark outside, even though it was only 6 p.m. We walked across a wide, well-reinforced bridge that curved upwards into an arch from the side of the riverbank, reaching a peak around 20 feet above the fast-flowing water. Just as we were about to reach the other side, I heard a faint yelp coming from a distance to our left. I turned my head. Even in the darkness, there was no mistaking that a kid was being swept along towards us in the water, the strong current dragging him mercilessly. It was clear that he couldn't swim and was being pulled along like a rag doll, flailing around to no avail. Before my dad could react, I sprinted back across the bridge and ran along the other side of bank, which the boy was closer to. I climbed over the fence running alongside the bank and ran to the edge, then crouched down and stretched my hand out as far as possible. The boy spotted me and tried to stretch his arm out too, but I could see from a distance that it wasn't enough. Our hands were going to be inches from touching, and he would be swept past me. thinking quickly. I took off my pink backpack and pulled out one of the straps to its full length. Then I flung it into the water with my arm outstretched. Holding onto the end of the strap tightly, the bulk of the bag bobbed in the middle of the river. As soon as the boy came past, he grabbed onto it, and I pulled with all my might. When he came within arm's distance, I held out my other hand, and he took it firmly as I pulled him out of the water. We lay clutching each other on the riverbank. He was shivering, soaked from head to toe. My dad finally caught up, shining the flashlight on the back of his phone camera at us. I recognized the boy. It was Noah, from my math class. I'd never talked to him before, though. He was one of the cool kids, a group I wasn't part of, and we sat at opposite ends of the class. Under the light, he also recognized me, and awkwardly let go of my arm. We climbed over the fence to the other side, where my dad was standing. "You all right, son?" asked my dad, catching his breath. "Yes, sir," he said, still trembling from the cold. My dad took off his jacket and wrapped it around Noah. "You hurt?" asked Dad. Noah shook his head. "Come on, let's get you warm back home then." My house was a 10-minute walk away. Noah was understandably quiet and in shock on the way back. When we arrived, I gave Noah one of my sweaters to change into, and Mom offered him dinner at our house. "I really should get going now. My mom's probably worried," he said nervously. "All right, but it's dark out. I'll give you a lift in the car," offered Dad. They left out the front door. The next day, I saw Noah with his friends in the corridor outside the lockers. The terrified, shivering kid I had dragged out of the river yesterday was gone, and he was back to his usual nonchalant self. As he came towards me, we made eye contact for a second, and I looked away quickly. I saw him breaking away from his friends and coming towards me out the corner of my eye. "Hey," he said. I turned to look at him again. "Hi," I replied. "I didn't get to say thanks properly yesterday, so thanks," he said. Don't worry about it," I said. "Want to hang out at lunch?" "Sure, I guess." "Okay, awesome. See you later." We got lunch together after third period and sat at a table opposite each other. "Don't you want to sit with your friends?" I asked. "It's fine. They'll live without me for an hour," he said. We started eating. "How did you end up in the river?" I finally asked. He paused for a second and stared at the chip on his fork. "I was walking home by myself from Jake's house, and I think I slipped when I got to the end of the bridge." "The bridge my dad and I were walking on?" "No. There's another bridge that looks exactly the same as that one a couple yards down." I wondered how that could have happened, as the bridge had barrier railings on both sides. "So you weren't climbing over the rails or anything?" I asked. "Oh, nah. I slipped," he said firmly. "Right." I didn't question further. We started hanging out all the time after that. Noah always came up to me every time he saw me, even if he was with his friends. I usually sat alone at lunch, but now we always sat together. When some older kids tried to take my lunch money outside the lockers, he ran over and told them to shove off. When we got phones, he texted me non-stop and always asked me to come to his house to play video games on the weekends. He texted me a link to a local news article one day, warning parents not to let their kids climb over bridge railings. "Look," it says, "some kid literally drowned in the same river I fell into." "Holy shit," I replied. "That's crazy." I wondered how a kid had even fallen in again. From what I remembered, the bridge had high railings on both sides, and there was a fence alongside both banks. My dad and I had walked across it almost every day without trouble when I was in middle school. It didn't strike me as an incredibly dangerous spot, unless you literally scaled the bridge railings and jumped off, or climbed over the fence along the bank. But even then, there was a healthy stretch of grass between the fence and the river, probably fell in from climbing around. I'd always thought Noah fell in that way too, but assumed he didn't want to admit it. As we got older and went into high school, Noah became handsome and athletic. People gravitated towards him, but somehow, he still stuck to me like glue. Anytime I texted him to meet up for anything, he would arrive without delay. My parents loved Noah, and my dad especially had a soft spot for him and wouldn't stop teasing me about spending so much time with him. On several occasions, I overheard girls talking about us in the bathrooms. They were confused as to why Noah was always with me when I was barely attractive. It hurt to hear, and sometimes I thought they were right. When we were 17, Noah and I were hanging at a park near our high school in the evening. We were alone and sat next to each other on a set of kids' swings that we were getting too big for. The sun was setting behind a wooded stretch in the distance. "Hey, I kinda like you," he said straightforwardly. "Want a date?" I felt my face flushing. "I'm not sure," I said quietly. "You can say no if you don't like me. I won't get mad." He smiled. It's not that," I said. He looked at me, waiting for an answer. "I just wonder sometimes," I continued. "I think you're too good for me. If it hadn't been for that river incident, would we even have been friends?" We sat in silence for a minute. "Probably not," he admitted candidly. "But it happened, so let's not downplay it." He got up and stood in front of me as I rocked back and forth on the swing. "You saved my life," he continued. "I know I'm pretty cool, but that wouldn't mean shit if I was dead. I owe you everything I've got, and I'm yours forever. So will you be mine?" "Stop being cringe or I'll kick you," I said, embarrassed. I tapped him with my shoe. He grabbed my foot and pulled me towards him. "So that's a yes?" I nodded, holding in a smile. So from then on, he was my boyfriend. We graduated high school and went to prom together. I ended up at his place after the prom, and we passed out on the couch. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. Noah was gripping my arm so tightly that it was cutting off my circulation. "Don't let go. Don't let it get me. Help me," he muttered in his sleep. I touched his cheek, and he seemed to wake up. He suddenly looked at me with the same terrified expression he had when I pulled him out of the water all those years ago. "Hey, I've got you. Don't worry," I said quietly, as he fell back asleep. Time went by fast, and before I knew it, we were a week away from starting college. On the last weekend of our vacation, he sent me a familiar text. Yet again, another kid had drowned in the same river I had saved him in years ago. Another child's body found at the mouth of the river. "Again? That's awful," I replied. "That's 5 kids now, 6 including me. I think there's something going on there. Wim, I'll show you. Meet me there." As I trekked the same 10-minute walk along the path I used to take to get to middle school, I wondered what he was going to show me. I walked up to him, standing at the head of the bridge my dad and I had walked across years ago. He was looking down, concerned. "What's up?" I chirped. "You see how there's no gap between the fence and where the bridge meets the side of the river?" he asked. "Yeah," I nodded. He gestured for me to follow him. We walked for a minute over to the second bridge, just barely in view from the first. He then pointed towards the same corresponding spot at the head of this second bridge. This was where I was when I fell. At the head of this second bridge, there was a gap of a few feet where the fence ended and the foot of the bridge began. There was about a 4-foot drop between the grass and the water below. I could see how someone could have fallen in if they purposefully walked off the side of the grass through the gap. But it still didn't seem like a place you could slip through easily. "There's something I didn't tell you the day after you saved me," he began, probably because I convinced myself it didn't happen, and it was really dark, so I didn't see anything. Actually, I'm still not sure if it did. I waited for him to get to the point, but I'm pretty sure I felt something pull my ankle as I walked past this gap. "Something pulled you?" "Yeah, definitely felt something yank my ankle. I convinced myself I'd just slipped on mud, but reading all these news articles, that's at least 5 kids that fell in this same river. I mean, 5 in a few years isn't shocking, but everyone knows not to climb in this area. The whole place is fenced off. So, I'm starting to think the same thing might have happened to those other kids in this spot." I walked up to the edge of the riverbank where the gap was and looked around down it. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a gap of unfenced grass. "What do you think pulled you?" I asked. I didn't see anything. It was dark. I'm sure I felt something grab my ankle though. This is weird, but it felt like a hand. A hand? I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's what it felt like. He started walking across the bridge to the other side, and I followed. There was a sparse wooded area surrounding the path that the bridge exited into. Noah walked through it to a bench a few yards away, and we sat on it. "I've just been watching people walking across the bridge for the past few days in the afternoon. You get a good view from here," he said. I looked at him. "Okay, that sounded weird, but for research purposes only. You know what I'm saying?" "What are you looking for?" I asked. "I don't really know, but I've got my eye on that gap next to the bridgehead on the other side." "Seen any zombie hands pop out and drag people in?" "Not yet," he said. We talked for a bit as the sun set and it started getting dark. A couple of people walked across the bridge in that time. Dog walkers, kids going home from school, the like. We were mid-conversation when we spotted 2 tall men dressed in all black start to walk across the bridge. There was something off about them, and we both caught on. We stopped talking abruptly and stared in silence. As they got to the end of the bridge, one of them stepped through the gap where there was no fence and reached out towards the underside of the bridge. He pulled himself from the bank onto the underside of the bridge, almost disappearing from view, except for one of his legs as he stood on a bit of scaffolding under the bridge. The other man followed, swinging off the side of the perching next to the first man. Their silhouettes were barely visible in the darkness and through the distance, but unmistakably present. "The fuck?" muttered Noah. I stared in confusion. We watched them for a few minutes, lurking under the bridge. "Jesus," said Noah. "Are they hiding under there to try and pull people into the river?" I took a second look. The distance between them and the unfenced part of the riverbank right next to the bridgehead was just within arm's reach. A chill ran through me. A couple walking their dog strolled over the bridge. I held my breath as they reached the other side and walked off the head of the bridge, past the gap in the fence. Nothing happened. Noah and I looked at each other tensely. In the next few minutes, an old man and another couple walked across the bridge without issue. "Maybe they're just chilling out there," I said. Noah was quiet, still staring as a young girl started walking over the bridge. As she got closer to the other side, one of the men leaned out from under the bridge and reached his arm out into the gap. "Oh shit," muttered Noah, standing up. Before I could clock what was going on, he ran out of the wooded area and to the foot of the bridge. "Stop," he yelled. The girl turned. "It's dangerous. Come back this way." The girl stood still, looking at him in confusion. "Come back over to this side," shouted Noah. She slowly started backing away from the head of the bridge. Yeah, that's it, he gestured. I caught up and stood next to him, waving and also shouting at the top of my lungs. Come back here. Suddenly, the two men clambered out from underneath the bridge and pulled themselves onto the riverbank. They ran onto the bridge. The girl screamed and started running towards us at breakneck speed, while the two men in black chased her and got closer to our end of the bridge. I panicked and instinctively retreated, but Noah ran forward straight onto the bridge and into the trajectory of the two men. He tackled one of them to the ground, and the other one joined in the brawl, allowing the girl to escape and reach the bank. She ran to my side and looked back. I looked at Noah in panic. I'll be fine. Go! He shouted. I hesitated. Move! He yelled. I took the girl's hand and we darted away from the bridge, my heart racing wildly. We got to the main road, where we went into a shop for cover. I called the cops and explained the situation to them and the shop staff, leaving the girl with one of them. 40 minutes max. Then, I ran back out and towards the bridge again. Stupid move, I know. What if the men were still out there? But I had to make sure Noah was okay. I got to the bridge and it was quiet. It was pitch black now, except from the moon which reflected on the surface of the water. Not a person in sight. Noah, I yelled. My voice echoed through the trees behind me, then silence. I ran to the peak of the bridge at the very center and collapsed on my knees. I could see cops running towards me in the distance. I managed to hold it together and explain what happened to them, that the girl was safe, but that I now had no idea where Noah or the two men dressed in black were. 2 days passed. 3 bodies were found in the lake that the river opened out into. One of the men in black had a knife on him and stabbed Noah in the gut 5 times. Then they tried to throw him off the side of the bridge, but he dragged them overboard and all 3 ended up in the water. These 2 men had been spotted by several passers-by, who didn't think much of them other than being a couple of fools or possibly construction workers. They came out in the dark a couple times a year and waited under the bridge for hours at a time for children walking alone to drag into the water as a twisted hobby. Most of the time, they wouldn't catch their target demographic, but about once a year, a child would go missing, then end up in the lake or washed up on the riverbank under unexplained circumstances. That pattern ended along with Noah. Naturally, I was inconsolable for months, having just lost my boyfriend and best friend of 6 years. After the grief, I was numb. Looking back, the mystery had been on Noah's mind ever since the second child who fell in died. The 2 men had just moved to the area 6 years ago. Noah would have been the first victim. He acted different that day at school, and although I couldn't tell what he was thinking, I knew something was on his mind. Initially, I thought he had shaken off his near-death experience with ease, but it came back to haunt him many nights. He finally got the answer he was looking for. What he felt was undoubtedly real, and more sinister than anyone could have imagined. They tried to kill him once, but he lived to tell the tale. Then he came back and took them down. I love you, Noah.
Story 3.
I wish I never went to the bathroom. It has been over a week since I last left the apartment. I was meant to return to work the other day, but have been avoiding my boss's calls. She's out there now, watching me. I can see her through the window. She'll leave soon, but then she'll be back tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then the day after that. Same time, same place, always watching. It started in the bathroom of a McDonald's just down the road from where I work. It had been a long shift, and I had to stay behind 2 hours as a co-worker called in sick. My legs were tired from standing all day, and my eyes were drooping from exhaustion. I washed my hands at the sink. The mirror reflected my awful features, bags under the eyes, acne scarring on my face. I felt icky. What are you doing here? A woman called from behind me. I flicked my hands in the sink to quickly dry them as I turned to face her. "Excuse me," she continued. "What are you doing in here?" In front of me was a 40-something-year-old woman, blonde hair and wearing sunglasses indoors. She looked furious. "Just washing my hands," I said. "You're a man?" she said. "I'm not." "What are you doing in the female bathroom, you freak?" She raised her voice over mine. "I'm just using the toilet." The woman pulled out her phone and, presumably, started recording me. "This pervert is in the ladies' bathroom checking on women." I lifted my hand up to block my face from the camera and walked brusquely out into the restaurant. I could hear the woman's heavy footfalls trail behind me. "Look at this groomer walking off now he's been called out," she said. I walked up to the front counter. No doubt she was there too. A member of staff was standing there putting an order together. "Hey," I leaned over. "Can you stop her?" "Oh yeah, call the cops." "We'll see what they have to say when they arrive," she said behind me. "Sorry, ma'am," the staff member said. "What's going on here?" "I don't know," I said. "I'm just trying to use the bathroom and she's harassing me." "Go on. Call them! They'll kick this freak out." "Ma'am," the worker said to her, "I'm going to have to ask you to stop or leave." "Stop what?" she said. "I'm just calling out this pedophile so they'll stop creeping on little girls." The worker sighed. "I'll just call the cops." "Yeah, they'll get this sicko out of here," she said. I sighed. "You know what? I'll just go." "Are you sure?" "Ma'am," the worker said. "Ma'am," the woman said. "That's a dude." "Yeah, I just needed the toilet anyway," I said. "I don't want to make a fuss." "Run away," she said. "Run away like the freak you are." Apart from the shouting woman, the place was completely silent as every bystander watched the situation unfold. I pulled my hoodie over my head and walked out the building as fast as I could. She followed. I walked across the McDonald's parking lot over to the supermarket next to me, where I parked my car. The entire time, the heckler followed me, her phone still up and recording. I tried to ignore her as she kept screaming absurd shit over and over. It didn't take long to make it back to the car. I jumped in and locked the door. The woman pulled the handle as soon as it clicked. Luckily, she was too slow. My hands choked the wheel as the adrenaline started to fade. I didn't realize how fast my heart was beating until it began to slow. She stood outside the window, still filming and shouting her obscenities as I got control of my breathing. After a minute, I started the car and reversed out of the space. She followed, still recording from the window. Once on the road, I put it into drive and sped out of the parking lot. I saw her standing in the rearview mirror, phone in hand, still screaming. A day later, the experience still left a mark on me. I dreamed about it overnight. Her face was vivid in my mind. All day I was filled with regret that I didn't let the police take care of it and hopefully get the woman taken away. Everything I didn't say to her floated in my head. I noticed it first when I took my dog out for a walk. A banged-up blue Chevrolet. Must have been from the 70s. The paint was peeling, replaced with rust. I didn't get a good look in from across the street. The glare from the sun was too strong, but it left an impression on me. I'd never seen a vehicle so distinct on this street before. Throughout the day, I kept looking out the window. The car was still there, down the road. I couldn't make out any features from the distance, but there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. It was freaking me out. I closed all the blinds in my apartment and tried to put it out of my mind for the time being. I was working the next day. It was at a cafe franchise in the same complex as the McDonald's. Most of my shift was spent making coffee and wiping down tables. The same old shit every day. Customers ranged from okay to horrible. I was just happy to get a paycheck. We closed later than most cafes at around 10 p.m., though we were usually out of there by 10:45 p.m. I noticed it when mopping the front of house. It wasn't so easy to see in the dark of night, but there was a blue Chevrolet, same model, same rusted coat, in the parking lot just outside the store. Again, I couldn't see the person sitting in the driver's seat, so I wandered out back and checked the cameras. Also not good enough, even when zoomed in. My coworker kept asking if I was okay, even though he tried to hide it. He was clearly annoyed that I was slowing down the close for no reason. I got on with mopping, but kept my eye on the parking lot. By the time we got out, the car was gone. It was back outside the apartment the next day. The car would arrive at around 10 a.m. and leave at 9 p.m. A few times throughout the day, it would leave and then come back an hour or so later. I could see the person sitting there for hours and hours, but I didn't want to confront them out of fear of what they might do. When I went in for my next shift, my co-workers were all staring at me. I greeted them with a good afternoon, but everyone returned it with a harsh glare as I was stuffing my bag into a locker in the back office. The store phone began ringing. My other co-worker in the back quickly shuffled out of there, ignoring the ringing. After a couple of seconds, it stopped. I closed the locker and put the key into my trouser pocket. The phone began ringing again. No one from front came out back. It was company policy that the phone must be picked up, but I wasn't to start my shift for another 5 minutes. I sat down at the office and listened to it ring until it eventually stopped. 10 seconds hadn't passed before the phone started to ring again. I picked it up. No caller ID was displayed on the screen. "You've reached..." "Who is this?" A woman's voice commanded on the other end. "This is this Amy?" I was shocked into silence for a moment. "How do you know me?" "What's your real name?" "What?" "You need to stop playing dress up. It doesn't suit you well." "Who is this?" I looked at the monitor and saw the blue Chevrolet parked outside. "Is that you following me?" I asked. "Stop pretending to be a woman, then I'll leave you alone." She hung up. I watched the Chevrolet pull out of the space and exit the parking lot on the monitor. I didn't see her again all day. When I got home after closing, a notification appeared from Facebook Messenger. It was a random account, no photo, fake name, requesting to DM me. I opened their request. "Hey, you don't know me, but I've been following this random page for a while. A handful of people are sharing your photos and private information around. Sorry you had to find out this way." They attached screenshots of posts from this group. All of them had my photos, ripped from my Facebook and Instagram accounts, posted along with disparaging comments and personal information. One of the posts even shared my address and workplace. Some screenshots of comments showed people taking glee in the idea of hurting me. All of them made fun of how I looked, picking apart all my insecurities one by one. "He's too tall. Look at those big hands. Why is he caked in makeup in every photo?" The anonymous account linked the group, but it was private. I called in sick the next day and took everything I had seen to the police. I told a detective about the Chevrolet, the online posts, the woman in the McDonald's, everything. I printed off the screenshots. I gave them the link to the account. I noted the reg number of the car. All the detective did was assure me everything was going to be okay and made a report, although the lack of immediate action was concerning. I got home 2 hours later. The car was parked up on the same spot it had occupied for days. I called the police then, wanting to make sure a tangible incident report was made, hopefully creating a paper trail if it ever escalated. However, before the cops could arrive, the car was gone. They somehow knew the police were coming. I made my report to the officers, and they scolded me for wasting their time before driving off. When I got into work the next day, my manager pulled me aside before I started my shift. He sat me down next to him in the office. "We've been getting reports," he said, "from employees here and head office of someone harassing everyone, and they keep naming you. I just want to make sure everything's okay and know if I can do anything to help." "What?" I was taken aback. "What about the head office?" "Well," he said, "HR have been getting floods of calls from no caller ID numbers and emails spammed to them. It's clear they're getting put into spam databases and stuff. We've had to turn the phone off here because people keep calling at all hours of the day. Head office have made reports to the police, but they're still investigating and want to make sure we give you the proper support." My heart sank. Everyone in the store had heard the women's rants. Even the middle management that know of me through the paperwork they receive. All of them know the embarrassing comments some random woman made about me. All of them knew I was being stalked. The surveillance monitors were open on the desk. I looked up at them and saw the blue Chevrolet was in the parking lot. Something broke. I got up and walked out the door. My manager called after me, though I can't recall his words. There was a sizable chunk of concrete broken off the sidewalk just outside. I took it in my hand and made for the car. I got a close look at the driver, the same blonde, 40-something woman that had harassed me in the McDonald's. She saw me coming and immediately started the ignition and drove for the exit. "Leave me the fuck alone!" I screamed. I arced my hand. The concrete left my palm and flew towards the Chevrolet. It missed the roof by a few inches and kept flying until it hit a black BMW parked behind it. The concrete broke in half as it left a massive crack on the windscreen. I fell to the floor. The emotions had finally hit me as the adrenaline wore off. I began crying and didn't stop for an hour. The police came. When the customer eventually came back to their car from the supermarket, he was pissed. Luckily, the two officers were able to keep things relatively calm. My manager spoke for me as I sat in the cafe. The two officers came in and informed me that he wasn't pressing charges so long as I covered the damages. Even though I had little money to my name, I agreed. My manager then told me to take a couple days off and said he was there if I needed help. All my co-workers stared at me in complete shock as I left the cafe. None of them said a word. I drove home by myself. Even though he needed it, I decided not to take my dog for a walk. I didn't want to be outside by myself at that moment. Instead, I made a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The blue Chevrolet is parked down the street. Always watching.
Story 4.
I spied on my sister and her boyfriend. It was so much worse than kissing. When I was around 8, I watched my older sister and her boyfriend, James. They had an air of secrecy about them. Thinking back to it, James had a strange attractiveness about him. Tall, with lanky arms, and pink lips that protruded in an almost perfect oval. Anne, I suppose, objectively, had a flattering figure, a thin nose that ended in a pronounced little button. I crouched behind some car junk, old hubcaps, and the rusted frame of a Toyota. Anne and James were on the opposite side of the little valley, and they walked down to the edge of the stream. There was a great thicket of foliage that kept me from seeing anything below their waists. James trudged behind Anne, who walked briskly. I could hear James speaking to my sister at the water. Thank God we're alone. James looked around to clarify, and I hoped I was truly hidden. The moment I saw you, I realized the reason for my existence. I knew that you were meant to be mine, and I knew that I was meant to be yours. You are my idol, the one that I worship. I am in love with you. I've never been so in love. Anne, I'd never ask for your affection. I am undeserving, unworthy. But if I can please... There was a thud and a great splash in the water. Anne said something to James that I couldn't make out, but he stopped talking. James stumbled and landed a kiss on Annie. An accident. Anne backed away from him and smeared the kiss from her face in overt rejection. I discovered I was sitting in ants and being bitten. I let out a yelp. From there, Anne's demeanor changed. She flew into James's arms and began kissing him passionately. He stood only for a moment, and then returned her advances. They fell into each other, and down into the foliage out of my sight. There was a poison. The two young lovers kissed and laughed, but the air was rotted. There was something unworldly. A screaming in my mind told me that I wasn't supposed to be there. So, I ran. I got out from behind that rusted truck and I ran, careful to keep my head below the foliage. It didn't matter. Anne heard me, and as an older teenager, her legs could travel quicker than mine. She caught up to me and grabbed me by the arm. I did what kids do and let the full weight of my body drop the floor. She yanked me up. I could feel her fingers digging into bicep where I was sure purple bruises would soon grow. She looked at me with malice, her eyes fixed and radiating none of the sisterly love I might expect. "Let me go," I shouted, afraid. "You're a good boy, Sam," Anne said with a glib sweetness. Behind her, I saw James where Anne left him. He was standing and looking at me with what I think now was pity. He stood there and shook his head, begging me not to make any sudden movements. James ran up to Anne and stood behind me to block me from trying an escape. James spoke in a way that felt genuine and desperate. Maybe he didn't like what he'd gotten himself into. As Anne was saying, "You're a good boy." When I was a kid, I used to spy on my older brother and his girlfriend. I know what it's like to be curious at your age. Anne loosened her grip on my arm, and I shook it a couple times. "What were you doing?" I asked, hoping for a satisfactory answer to disperse the looming fog of fear. "I think you have an idea of what we were doing. You're old enough," Anne said. "Just don't tell Mom. Please, Sam. James is really important to me, and you know exactly how Mom is." Anne rolled her eyes for emphasis. I was relieved, but now I had something on them. It's an obligation of younger siblings to a bother to their older siblings. "I won't say anything if you give me $1. James took a crumpled dollar bill from his pocket, gave it to me, and shrugged. I ran off. All was okay. My sibling and her boyfriend were young lovers. We shared a secret, and I was $1 richer. The next day I was sitting on the steps behind the banister, while James and Anne were crouched by a set of boxes in the living room. I figured the more secrets I had, the more favors I could get. I wondered how much money I could get from James. "That little shit," Anne sneered. "He's just a kid," James offered. "A kid who's going to ruin this." She tapped one of the boxes with her hand. I ran out down the stairs and into the living room. "Found you. Again." Anne looked at James, and James blushed. Just like last time, he pulled a crumpled dollar out of his pocket and gave it to me. It was all in a day's work, and I ran upstairs to put the dollar bill next to the other one in the drawer where I kept my socks and the old bags of chips I'd snuck upstairs. I tormented the two of them for a month. There were more boxes and more trips to the field. There was a smell about the house, and James fell into a daze. He followed my sister around like a dog, and I hardly noticed. I was having so much getting a rise of them, getting bits of money. I thought it was harmless fun, and I should have noticed all that was wrong. I should have noticed how my mother only came out of her room once in a while, and how when she did, she stared into the distance at absolutely nothing at all. It was September 1st. At around 3 in the morning, there were no boxes in the living room, but a circle of heads. Some I recognized as neighbors, some I thought I might have seen before, and some were strangers to me. Each had a candle sticking out of their scalp that burned, while wax dripped in long strings from their noses. Some of them had a look of concern about them, and some had tongues that lolled from their mouths, and bits of saliva that dripped to the floor. I was in my usual spot at the top of the stairs, behind the banister. This time I didn't want to jump out to surprise them. Instead I shook, and tears filled my eyes. It was like that first time in the field, but so much worse than that. Not that strange fear of a child's imagination, but something real. Something that shouldn't be, but was. "Come down, Sam," Anne ordered. James just sat by the circle of heads. I don't think there was much in him at that point. Whatever my sister did to him, she had done it completely. I walked down the stairs. I knew there was no use trying to escape. I stood before her out of breath. I tried to speak, but nothing. Anne shouted again, "Mom, come to here!" I heard the creak of our mom's door from the left of where we stood and the soft sliding of her slippers against the carpet. She had the same dazed look that James sported, the same thing done to her. "All of you, get in the middle of the circle." She shot a glance at each one of us. I'd never seen my sister so happy. There was an unrepentant glee in every word she spoke. There was a bounce in her movements. My mother and my sister's lover walked right into the middle of those horrible heads. Those heads were watching them. "Get in the circle," Anne screeched at me. I just screamed. I screamed as loud as I could and hoped that someone could hear me and save me from this. The house had become lost in a void beyond time and goodness. But maybe I could break through. Maybe there was hope. "Get in the fucking circle." Anne grabbed me by the arm and dragged me into the circle. The mouth of each head opened then and started a low groan and started to chant. Some unknown language full of clicks and sounds I think impossible for a human to make. I tried to move but froze instead. "It's happening," Anne shouted. An ant crawled out of my pocket. The tiniest creature would be the one to save our lives. It had a chip crumb from one of those upstairs chip bags, and it walked down my pant onto my socks and then across the floor. Blissfully unaware of the world of the unknown and the demonic affairs we were trapped in, it walked past the heads, and the heads all at once stopped moaning and fell over. The life came back to James and my mother's eyes. We all pushed back Anne and ran out the door into the neighborhood street. Dawn was soon, and the earlier birds were chirping. Everything was normal again. A few years later, when I was a bit older, I had my own girlfriend. We sat in that field behind the rusted Toyota that stayed unchanged apart from the foliage that was slowly enveloping it. My heart swelled with love. I wanted to tell her exactly how I felt, how I wanted to be with her forever. But instead, I just turned and said to her, "Sarah, I'm glad you're here." "I'm glad you're here, too." Sarah smiled and kissed me on the lips. My world lit up, and I closed my eyes to savor the emotion. "Watch out for the anthill. By the way," I said as Sarah shifted.
Story 4. The inexplicable case of John Doe. I'm a coroner. I've only had one strange encounter in my career, but it still keeps me up at night. I don't get freaked out by much. I'm not a squeamish person, nor a superstitious one. You can't be in my line of work. But I can't explain John Doe. We don't get any murders in my city. Overall, we're a pretty quiet and safe community. It's rare that a full autopsy is required, and it's more likely to be requested for unexpected deaths, medical malpractice, that kind of thing, than it is for a suspected murder. We don't have a separate medical examiner's office. I'm just in the basement of the hospital, which frankly isn't much of a hospital. It's better equipped than a typical doctor's office, but there are outpatient centers that are bigger than us if you go to a big city. If you have a complicated illness, you drive a few hours to Cleveland. However, I'm our coroner. I certify all deaths in the city and perform all our autopsies. When an unknown body turned up in the woods, you better believe the cops were all over it. It was the only exciting thing to happen to them that week. Hell, maybe ever. Several more officers than were necessary came in with the paramedics looking for some answers on how he'd gotten there. I didn't know. He didn't have any defensive wounds. There was nothing in the initial exterior examination. Livor mortis and rigor mortis were present. I estimated the death at around 12 hours prior. The X-rays came back normal. There were no obvious signs of poisoning upon interior examination. Stomach contents were a half-digested tuna sandwich and I think a Coke. His heart was enlarged, but not abnormally so. It was indicative of cardiomyopathy. But this is the United States of America. We're all fat and have heart disease. The one weird thing was that we had trouble getting prints. No matter how we took them, they just looked blurred. The police couldn't run them, but his fingertips didn't appear to be damaged in any way. To visual inspection, they appeared normal. Due to the lack of any other evidence, I would have guessed heart attack if I hadn't known the circumstances. But he was found a mile into the woods, stark naked, a few feet off the trail. The most likely cause, I felt, was poison. There weren't obvious signs, but sometimes there aren't, depending on what was used. He didn't have dirty feet, which meant he probably didn't strip naked and go for a run. He was likely placed there after death. I told the police as much. I packed his organs back into his chest cavity, his brain back in his skull, and put him away. I sent the samples to the lab for testing, but it takes a while, and the really comprehensive panels are expensive enough that the department didn't want to pay for them. I mean, you don't show up in the woods, naked, by yourself, in the middle of the night, and then die of natural causes. Typically, he didn't show any obvious signs of a drug overdose. The police believed it was a homicide, but without any evidence, I ruled cause of death undetermined. We left it there, and that was the last I thought of it, until the lab called me to ask what the hell I had sent them. The lab results were inconclusive. They couldn't get any DNA from the samples at all. I went to get the body back out and take some more samples, maybe look at some new tissue slides under the microscope again, but he wasn't where I left him. I looked high and low, meaning in each cold locker, thinking I had mislabeled or misremembered where I put him, but he wasn't in any of them. It's not a large morgue. It's not like misplacing your keys. If I couldn't find the body, it was gone. I didn't like that at all. To be honest with you, I panicked. How do you lose a body? In all my years in the field, I had never heard of such a thing happening. I called up the chief of police and explained the situation. He asked some questions I wasn't sure of the answers to. Yes, I'd left my office unattended on occasion. No, I hadn't been paying close attention to whether I locked it at the end of every day. I was pretty sure I did. I do so out of habit, but I wasn't completely sure. We're a small city, safe. Stealing human remains is outside the common way. It's not something I had considered a possibility. So the police added a report about the theft of human remains from government custody, which I'm sure if they ever caught the perpetrator would be a list of charges longer than my leg. The running theory was that someone stole the remains to cover up the murder. That didn't go over well, since it implied a member of the hospital staff was likely involved. But what can you do? The police weren't too serious about pursuing it. I don't think they seriously suspected anyone at the hospital. Without an ID, it was hard to investigate. It was a decent, scary story to talk about at parties, especially since the death had been well covered by the local papers. Everyone around here had heard about it. A few months went by, and honestly, I hardly thought about it anymore, though I was careful to lock the morgue when I left for the day. We were busy. We were having an unfortunate uptick in deaths, so I had gotten the okay to hire on an assistant. He was a sharp kid. He learned quickly. He had a few autopsies under his belt when another body turned up. John Doe, clothed this time. Hanes, not so, white t-shirt and Levi's, well-worn tennis shoes, called in by a scared teen who found him in the dumpster behind the fast food joint where she worked. It was a different pair of cops who responded at the scene. Whole different team of people, EMTs, everybody, which is why I guess I was the first to notice. "What the fuck?" I said when I saw his face. "What?" asked my assistant. "This is the same guy," I said. "This is the same guy that went missing before. A missing persons case. You recognize him?" "No, I mean the same guy. The remains that went missing a few months ago. How is this possible?" My assistant didn't have any idea, but I was highly agitated and probably not making a lot of sense. The two cops who brought him in this time weren't particularly helpful. They started speculating that it was a serial killer with a specific type. I called back and insisted they send some more senior guys down, the ones who picked up John Doe before. So Laurent and Bill came down to take a look. "Well, I'll be goddamned," Laurent said. "It's the same fucking guy." "Couldn't be," Bill said. "A twin, maybe?" "Maybe," I agreed grudgingly. "It must be. What are the odds?" "Well, could it be the same guy?" Laurent asked. "Hear me out. What if they took the remains and froze them?" I shook my head. "I performed an autopsy last time. This guy hasn't been cut open." "You'd think if there was a pair of identical twins missing, someone would have reported it," Bill said. "I can make a few calls. Let me know if anything comes back." The weird thing, well, one of the weird things about that body was that it was fresh. The police believed he had been in the dumpster a few hours at most, but he could have died elsewhere and been moved, and in fact that seemed likely based on the activity at the restaurant. However, he had no signs of livor mortis, which, if you don't know, is discoloration of the skin due to blood pooling. It's obvious to visual inspection. The ambient temperature was quite warm, and counterintuitively, this typically accelerates the onset of rigor mortis, which you probably do know of. It begins in fine muscles of the face before affecting the hands, and then the rest of the larger muscles, making them stiff. It usually sets in about 2 hours to 8 hours post-mortem, and lasts for about a day altogether. You can estimate the time since death based on how it's affecting the muscles. John Doe had no signs of rigor mortis whatsoever, nor any of the markers that come after that. In short, he was dead, but didn't display some of the typical signs of being dead, and none of the ones that would help estimate time since death. He presented, honestly, like someone who had just died on the examination table moments before. We have a set of steps we take to verify a person is actually dead. It includes an EKG. There's no way to make a mistake. The EMTs on the scene had also pronounced him dead. For what that's worth, he was dead. I felt a bit superstitious, but even so, I couldn't help but check for a pulse a few times before making an incision, just in case. I had a weird feeling like the subject wasn't dead, and I feel weird even saying this, but just barely dead, only mostly dead, as they said in The Princess Bride. But I mean it in a much less charming way. Something about this body felt off. However, I'm not sure if I was just jittery due to the circumstances, and hindsight does not improve my recollection of him at all. If you're a decent coroner, you're the methodical type. I'm at least halfway decent, and wouldn't say I half-assed it the first time, but I was extremely meticulous this time. By the book. We opened him up. We examined every organ. We even cut into his limbs, which we don't normally do without specific reason. We took a lot more samples than we had the first time. His heart was strange. I weighed it, and it was enlarged. I was planning to do a couple of cross-sections to see if it was healthy. But when I pressed into it with the scalpel, a viscous white fluid oozed out. It had a smell that seeped through my mask. My assistant had to run and retch. I don't know if you've ever vomited into a face mask and shield, but it's messy. He was effectively down for the count. The smell was like walking into a Yankee Candle store. Sort of. Not a bad smell per se. Not like a severely decomposing body, but still strong enough to make you lightheaded. I've never seen or heard or smelled of anything like it. It was like the fluid had completely filled the atrial and ventral cavities. I would have said it was like his blood had been replaced, but when we vacuumed out his chest cavity, the blood had been normal. His arteries and veins were normal. It was only the heart. I guessed that whatever happened must have been post-mortem, or else it would have been pumped through his arteries. But that didn't explain what had happened. I briefly debated the merits of dumping the fluid down the sink, and therefore eventually into the municipal water supply, but decided against it. I put on fresh gloves and took a careful sample, being sure to seal it. I then put the whole metal tray full of the substance into one of the triple-bagged 5-gallon buckets we had handy. I tied the bags off, closed the lid, and then bagged the bucket for good measure. We left the room. I locked the door behind me, and we went upstairs to give my assistant a chance to recuperate. The ventilation down there is very good, so we hoped it would dissipate the smell in the meantime. When we finally went back into the room, the smell had mostly disappeared, along with the body. So had the samples, the bucket with the substance in it, and even the camera we had been photographing him with. We called in the police again. They added a note to their report. If you're wondering about security footage, we had very few cameras. They were limited to the public entrances at the front and back of the building, and in the emergency room and main corridors on the first floor. There weren't any in the stairwells, which were on either side of the building, had emergency exit doors to the outside, nor were there any cameras in the basement, which only held the morgue, some storage rooms, and some admin offices. I know it probably seems strange to some of you, but we're a drive-by town with no real crime, and this was years ago. Cameras weren't as ubiquitous as they are today. I heard the police complain to the mayor, but the state was also in the middle of a budget crisis at that time, so I assumed they didn't have the money to add more. So, when the body showed up the third time, about 6 months later, I was beside myself. A distressed citizen called in a report of a creepy man parked in a car just outside her family's home. When dispatch sent some police to investigate, it became obvious he was dead after they shot him. After a couple verbal warnings, the rookie officer panicked and fired. The bullet passed through his left shoulder. Word got around. The rookie was swearing up and down that he saw movement, which is clearly impossible because the man was dead. But, in fairness, most of what had occurred with this guy seemed impossible. His partner said there wasn't any movement. It was just a rookie who was trigger-happy. That was the official report. But interestingly enough, off-duty and after a few beers, he confessed to Laurent, who passed it on to me, that something was not quite right about the body. He wouldn't say what. I am not sure if that's how he really felt, or if he was drunk and trying to placate Laurent, who was pissed that some white kid with a badge fired a shot at an unmoving, unresponsive person and got off with a slap on the wrist. The police didn't want word getting out about this disappearing, reappearing body. Neither did the mayor, as it wasn't good press for him. So he and the police department let our local reporters have a field day with the rookie, who ended up quitting the force and leaving town. He couldn't take the notoriety, so he left. I heard he started a landscaping business with his brother in Indiana. The third autopsy itself was mostly normal, aside from the absence of the typical stages of death, liver and/or rigor mortis, putrefaction, which I don't mean to gloss over because it is very strange, incredibly strange. It's impossible, but so is doing an autopsy on the same person 3 times. Honestly, in that situation, it was almost weirder that it was normal. When you're expecting something to jump out at you, every minute it doesn't is agonizing. He still didn't seem right to me, but we didn't find any other abnormalities. I kept slicing into him and expecting something mind-numbingly weird to happen, but there were no mysterious fluids, nothing mysterious at all. There was the obvious entry and exit wound of the bullet, but nothing else of note, which was both not strange enough and also still strange. There still weren't any obvious causes of death. He was by every measure a perfectly healthy human male. I wondered if I had entered some sort of purgatory for mediocre medical examiners. Maybe this body was punishment for missing something, and I was doomed to repeat it until I found the cause of death. I really was questioning my career and my life choices by this point. When I went home, I started talking with my wife about moving closer to her family like she's always wanted. I don't like her family, but a fresh start in a new town seemed like a good idea. We were careful that time about chain of custody. The police department sent us a detail to guard the body, which mainly consisted of a guy in the basement of the hospital to watch the lockers after we left for the night. We did our thing and put the guy into cold storage. We shipped the samples to the big lab upstate. But of course, it did have to get weird. Like with the previous bodies, no matter how carefully we took prints, the images always looked blurred when we tried to match them in the database. Same with his dental records. The DNA samples came back inconclusive. We sent them another sample. Same results. The police don't formally close investigations for at least a year, but we only have to hold unclaimed remains for 30 days. We kept some samples assuming there was going to be a protracted back and forth with the lab, but we sent him for cremation as soon as it was allowed. I wanted him out of my morgue. But you know the story by this point. A couple guys came to transport him first thing. I opened the locker to pull him out, and the body was missing. So we opened every cold locker in the storage room to make sure I hadn't misplaced him. This time we found him. I wish we hadn't. He was on top of someone else. They were lying together, like someone had placed them there in the mockery of a marriage bed. I cannot stress this enough. It was deeply disturbing, and I say this as someone who has seen some pretty gruesome deaths. First of all, the girl was underage. I mean, if you're going to pull a prank like this, I guess you could argue age doesn't really matter when you're talking about lifeless bodies. I don't know that that was the intent, but the image alone was bad. I can't forget how it looked. This middle-aged man with his arms wrapped around a blonde teenage girl. She looked like a child. She had overdosed, not disfigured by an accident or anything like that. I don't think you could mistake her for a sleeping girl, but she looked peaceful enough. And this guy honestly did look like he was sleeping. He just didn't look dead to me. I don't know how to describe it. I've been in this line of work a long time, and I've never seen a body look like that. It looked like this grown man had crawled into bed to sleep with a dead little girl. Aside from the grotesqueness of the scene, it was a complicated pose. His arms were wrapped around her. So parts of him were under her, and parts of her were under him, if that makes sense. It would have taken significant manipulation of both bodies to get them into that position. It took me and my assistant both to get them separated. We didn't take pictures. It was probably protocol, it being a crime scene and all. But it didn't feel right. I didn't want evidence that her parents might see in some court case someday. I didn't pick up the camera, and no one asked me to. Everyone was pretty rattled. The techs didn't like it. The on-duty cop didn't like it. He liked it even less when his shift commander personally drove down to the hospital to grill him and hospital security. Had he fallen asleep? Had he been skipping out? Had he left the body alone for any length of time? He swore up and down the only times he left were to take a leak. 2 minutes tops. He locked the door behind him. There was no one in the basement of the building when he usually took his bathroom break around 4 a.m. There was, of course, nothing on the cameras overnight. But as I mentioned, the emergency exit doors in the stairwells were not monitored, as they only opened from the inside. So we supposed it was in the barest realm of possibility that someone walked in the main entrance and hid out, or snuck in the side entrance one night, came downstairs to do their deed at 4 a.m., only to escape out a side door. It seemed improbable someone could move those bodies alone, and that quickly. Maybe the police officer was lying, and in on it, and even helped the perp. But that, of course, begs the question, to what end? For the cop? Or this unknown person or people, what possible motive could there be for that? They didn't steal or destroy evidence this time. It was simply bizarre. The shift commander was frustrated, but the details didn't point to anything plausible. The police did a very thorough investigation. They swept the whole lab for prints. There was nothing unusual. All people who had been there and were supposed to have been there, and not that many prints besides, as most of the time people wear gloves. They didn't find anything on the CCTV tapes. None of the hospital staff remembered anything unusual in the past month. Anyway, the techs carted the guy off and they cremated him. There was some dithering about whether to continue to hold him in light of these new events, but I think everyone was just as eager to get rid of him as I was. So he left that morning to get cremated. I followed up with one of the guys who took him, and he swore he saw John Doe go into the chamber with his own eyes. I felt relieved. He hadn't disappeared this time. Whatever this bizarre tableau was, it was over. And yet, imagine my surprise when he showed up again. Turned up like a bad penny. I didn't even ask the circumstances. I was afraid to. I'll spare you the details of the autopsy. There was nothing noteworthy. Again, no cause of death could be determined. He went into a locker. I sent the samples to the lab even though I knew it was futile. Can you guess what happened after? Yeah, we lost the body again. Only took a couple days. This time there were eyewitnesses, though what they saw frankly raises more questions than it answers. An admin saw a guy in misfitting clothes and a lab coat limping barefoot out of the lobby. She said she called out to him a few times, but he ignored her. She knew he didn't work in the building, and of course the bare feet were suspicious. She was worried he was having some kind of psychiatric episode, so she called security and the police. He went right out the back door. You can see him on the security footage of the rear parking lot. Just the grainy, monochrome back of his head. John Doe shuffling away from the building. The worst part for me is the clothes he's wearing. They're mine. I kept a spare set downstairs. He went through my things and he took them before he walked off. The admin is in frame for a few seconds. She comes and stands outside, watching the man go. If you watch the tape all the way through, the cops get there, and she comes back out with security. They confer for a minute. She points them in the direction John Doe went, and they go after him. If you keep watching, a second set of cops pull up and go after the first two. And what wasn't caught on camera was the manhunt when the first two cops didn't come back. They stopped responding to their radios shortly after entering the woods near the property line, past the parking lot. The second set of officers couldn't find them. The next day, they brought in some local huntsmen who are good trackers. Then they brought in dogs from a K9 unit in another town. When both of those failed, the police enlisted able-bodied volunteers to completely scrub the whole area, square foot by square foot. The manhunt lasted about a week before they gave up hope. It was a major scandal. People were speculating all sorts of crazy things. An escaped asylum patient gone on a murderous rampage in the woods. What have you. The fact that he was a dead John Doe actually managed to get swept by the wayside. He was clearly alive in the security footage. Everyone wanted to know who he was. We never figured it out. The car he was found in the previous time was registered to an elderly man a few towns over, who had died of natural causes, and the car had been reported stolen by his son, who was the executor of his estate. They denied knowing John Doe, and neither of them could be proven to have any association with him. Nor did they resemble him, so the car theft didn't seem like a personal or familial dispute. The trail was cold. I'm ashamed to say I didn't join the search to find the missing officers. To be honest with you, and I feel guilty about this, I hope they didn't find John Doe. Missing men be damned. I couldn't bear to do another autopsy on him, and resolved to quit on the spot if they found him. And lucky or unlucky, they didn't. They never found a trace of him, nor the police officers who followed him. No blood, no sign of a struggle, not even a footstep. It's been many years since then. I think he's gone for good. I don't know what John Doe wanted, but I guess he must have gotten it somehow. Or maybe he's haunting some other benighted ME's office somewhere. I'll tell you, while I like my job, and I always have, I've hated unzipping body bags since then. I'm always half afraid it will be John Doe in there, laughing at me. My retirement is coming up soon, and I'm looking forward to never having to wonder if I'll see him again. Story 5. I'm a house flipper, and I bought a supposed murder house. In the oppressive silence of my room, I quite often find myself laying awake each night contemplating my dreams. With each passing night, an unsettling sensation creeps over, as if an unseen presence lingers in the shadows. I lay in bed, paralyzed in fear, watching the silhouettes dancing in the darkness. It wasn't always like this. No, there was a time where night was a sanctuary, and my dreams a haven for peace. until I moved into this damned house. History creaked through the floorboards and carved into the very foundations itself. The once majestic manor now a decrepit reminder through the passage of time. I bought the house 6 months ago, drawn to its serene charm and grand architecture. Little did I know it hid behind a facade of charm and elegance. Like the previous owner before me, I was warned of the house's dark history, a cautionary tale whispered by the locals. The realtor's eyes, though masked with a veneer of professionalism, carried an unspoken dread, a silent plea not to venture into the tangled narrative of the property's past. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Johnson? I'm sure some of the other houses would be sufficient to your needs," the realtor asked, his eyes showing dread. "I've heard rumors, but doesn't every house have its own tale? Besides, I'm not one to shy away from a history lesson," I said, shrugging off his warnings. His professional veneer shifted a bit as he hesitated before speaking. "This place has history, all right. Quite darker than most. Are you sure you want to continue with this?" Ignoring the warnings, I grinned at him confidently. I'm not one to back down from a challenge. "Let's sign." As the ink dries on the contract, the realtor's eyes mirrored a silent plea. He said, "Please, reconsider. This house has a way of turning dreams into nightmares." I chuckled nervously, dismissing his concerns. Old houses come with stories. My friend, I'm ready for a bit of history, even if it's a tad dark. He sighed. "History, indeed. But remember, not all tales are meant to be lived. I'm a house flipper. Any house close to 100 years old could be deemed haunted," I remarked casually, scanning the vintage details of the aging structure. The realtor's eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. "This one's different. It's not just about its age, it's about the stories that linger in its corners." I chuckled, dismissing his caution. Stories are just stories. I'm here to give this place a modern makeover and a fresh start. In the beginning, the house seemed almost welcoming, its faded grandeur casting a nostalgic charm that belied its sinister reputation. The first few days passed without incident, as if the tales of horror were nothing more than fanciful whispers carried on the wind. I explored every corner of the old mansion, marveling at its architectural beauty and imagining the lives that once thrived within its walls. As the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness descended upon the house, subtle changes began to manifest. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my vision, and strange noises echoed through the empty halls, voices beckoning me to finish the house. Voices insisting I not sell the house, for I was already home. At first, I dismissed them as figments of my imagination, the product of an overactive mind fueled by ghost stories and superstition. But as the days stretched into weeks, the presence lurking within the house grew more pronounced, its malevolent energy seeping into every crack and crevice. Sleep became elusive, plagued by restless dreams and the sensation of being watched. I found myself drawn to the French-style windows, peering out into the inky darkness that covered the garden, searching for answers that remained just out of reach. As I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind like a haunting melody, each note tinged with a sense of unease. Despite the comfort of my surroundings, a chill crept over me, causing goosebumps to erupt on my skin. Outside, the wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows and sending shivers down my spine. Shadows danced on the walls, their twisted shapes flickering in the dim moonlight that filtered through the curtains. I pulled the covers tighter around me, seeking solace in their warmth. But the feeling of unease persisted, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness like a persistent whisper. And then, just as I began to drift into an uneasy sleep, I heard it, a soft, wet sound, smacking almost. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen, my eyes scoping out the darkness for any clue, my senses on high alert for any sign of danger. For a moment, all was still, the only sound the steady rhythm of my own breathing. But then, in the corner of my room, a silhouette stood. Adjusting my eyes, I could make out that it was most definitely a woman, but facial features shrouded in shadows. I lay paralyzed with my mind racing with thoughts. Was it merely a trick of the imagination, or had something truly sinister invaded my sanctuary? She stood there, unmoving, her form illuminated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. Her features were obscured, shrouded in darkness, piercing through the veil of night. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a thunderous drum echoing in the silence of the room. I wanted to scream, to flee from the terror that held me captive, but my voice was caught in my throat, suffocated by the weight of my fear. For what felt like an eternity, we remained locked in a silent standoff. I blinked, hopeful that the manifestation from my mind would vanish, but when my eyes opened, she was closer, just standing there. Her head leaned over to her left side. I lay there, trembling and alone, grappling with the terrifying reality of what I was witnessing. Was she merely a figment of my imagination, a trick of the mind conjured by the shadows of the night? Or was she something far more sinister, a harbinger of doom lurking in the depths of the darkness? Relief washed over me as I blinked, unable to believe my eyes. In an instant, the woman that had stood before me vanished, leaving behind the pungent smell of copper in the air. I sat there, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my heart still racing with the adrenaline of terror. Had it all been a trick of the mind? A hallucination born from the depths of my imagination? I had been working on this house vigilantly for weeks. Had I overexerted myself? With trembling hands, I reached out to touch the empty space where she had stood just moments before, half expecting her to materialize once more, but there was nothing. Only the stillness of the night and the soft glow of the moon casting shadows on the walls. As days passed, my fascination with the house grew into an all-consuming obsession. Never in my career had I become determined to preserve every original piece of architecture, every intricate detail engraved into the house. The whispers inside the house seemed to follow me wherever I went, becoming more and more insistent on the continuous work on the house. Each night she visited me in my dreams. Some nights were dreams inside of dreams, but I always felt I was wide awake and could not scream. As I lay in bed, enveloped by the stillness of the night, I could feel her presence drawing near, a cold chill creeping into the room with every step she took. Her silhouette would materialize in the darkness, her ethereal form bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight streaming through the window. She never spoke, but some nights when the moonlight was just right, I could see her eyes. Her eyes held a silent plea, a longing for release from the torment that bound her to my dreams. I wanted to reach out to her, to offer some semblance of comfort in the endless void of her existence, but fear held me back. There was something unnerving about her presence, something that brought me great dread. And so, night after night, I would lie in bed, unable to escape the relentless gaze of the spectral woman as she watched over me with a silent intensity. Her visits were a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the threshold of my consciousness, a darkness that threatened to consume me if I dared to confront it. But as the nights stretched on and her visits became routine, a strange sense of familiarity began to settle over me, despite the fear and uncertainty that her presence evoked. I uncovered something that began to answer the questions I've had since living here. I had descended into the depths of the old mansion's basement. The air grew thick and musty with the faint smell of copper entering my nostrils once again. As I navigated the narrow staircase, the only sound the faint echo of my own footsteps. The silhouette of the woman kept manifesting herself as I made my way further, as if she was guiding me. As I reached the bottom, my gaze fell upon a pile of old newspapers strewn across the floor, their yellowed pages curling at the edges with age. With trembling hands, I reached out to pick one up, the headlines blurring before my eyes as I read of a tragedy that had unfolded years ago. The articles spoke of a family torn apart by violence, their lives shattered by a senseless act of murder. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the details of the grisly crime, each word like a dagger piercing my soul. But it was the photograph that accompanied the articles that sent a shockwave of horror through me. a grainy image of the young woman, her eyes staring out from the faded print with intensity. The aberration stood in the corner, but this time the sounds of sobbing could be heard. Then I was flooded with realization that this woman was the young girl in the picture. The article was dated 1937, only 2 years after the house was built. Its faded print barely legible as I strained to decipher the words. With a sense of unease gnawing at my gut, I began to read. Local family tragedy rocks, quiet community. In a shocking turn of events, the peaceful town of Clearwater was shaken to its core by a brutal act of violence that claimed the lives of the Peterson family. According to authorities, the bodies of John and Elizabeth Peterson, along with their young daughter Emily, were discovered in their home late last night. Neighbors reported hearing screams coming from the Peterson residence, prompting a concerned citizen to alert the police. When officers arrived on the scene, Elizabeth and Emily were found in their beds, dismembered. John was found in his study with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. As investigators work to unravel the mystery behind the heinous crime, speculation runs rampant throughout the community. Some believe it to be part of a pagan ritual, while others whisper of darker forces at play. The tragedy has left Clearwater reeling, its residents grappling with the loss of innocence in a town once untouched by violence. As the investigation continues, one thing remains certain. The wounds left by the Peterson family's untimely demise will take years to heal, if they ever do. I stood frozen in horror. The words of the article echoed in my mind, each syllable a chilling reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within the very walls of the old mansion. As I sifted through the pile of old newspapers, each article revealed a new layer of tragedy that had unfolded within the walls of the old mansion. The headlines told a harrowing tale of lives cut short and families torn apart, each one a chilling reminder of the darkness that had plagued the house for generations. One article detailed the story of the Johnson family, suffering the same fate, leaving behind a barrage of unanswered questions. Another recounted the tragic death of the Smiths, whose bodies had been discovered in a state of grotesque mutilation, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. As I read through the articles, the old mansion had been a house of death long before I had set foot within its walls, a cursed monument to the sins of the past. With each new revelation, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place. The whispers, the shadows, the spectral woman. They were all manifestations of the darkness that had taken hold of the house, a malevolent force that hungered for blood and despair. As I delved deeper into the pile of old newspapers, I uncovered a series of articles that sent a shiver down my spine. They spoke of a dark chapter in the history of the old mansion. According to the articles, the land upon which the house stood had once been sacred ground, an ancient Indian burial ground that held the spirits of the ancestors. The Petersons who claimed the land had ignored the warnings, choosing instead to desecrate the sacred ground and build their home upon its hallowed soil. As I read on, I learned that many of the trees and stones that had once adorned the burial ground had been harvested and refined into the very fabric of the house itself. The walls, the floors, even the foundation, they all bore the imprint of the land's bloody history, a testament to the sins of those who had come before. With a sinking heart, I realized the true nature of the darkness that had taken hold of the old mansion. It was not merely a haunted house, but a cursed monument to the atrocities committed against the native people, a reminder of the blood that had been spilled in the name of greed and conquest. And as I stared down at the articles spread out before me, I knew that I could no longer ignore the truth. The whispers, the shadows, Emily, the manifestations of spirits, some vengeful others, poor souls that ended up in unfortunate circumstances. I knew what I had to do. The house, no, not a house, an apparatus for the other world had to be destroyed. It had to burn. I made my way upstairs, determined to find fuel. As I reached for the front door, my hand hesitated mid-air, a sudden wave of apprehension washing over me. Something wasn't right. The door that had once served as the entrance to the old mansion now seemed to lead to nowhere. its threshold covered in darkness. With a furrowed brow, I pushed open the door, expecting to step out onto the front porch. But instead of the familiar sight of the overgrown garden and the winding driveway, I was met with an abyss, a yawning void stretching out before me, swallowing the remnants of the old mansion whole. I blinked in disbelief, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. How could the front door lead to nowhere? As I peered into the darkness beyond the threshold, a chill ran down my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. It was as if the void itself was alive, pulsating with a malevolent energy that sent shivers down my spine. With a deep breath, I stepped through the threshold, steeling myself for whatever lay on the other side. The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating blanket, obscuring my vision and leaving me disoriented and vulnerable, the smell of copper and iron now stronger than ever before. As I ventured deeper into the abyss beyond the front door, my senses heightened by the oppressive darkness that surrounded me. I caught sight of something in the distance, a bright light shining like a beacon amidst the abyss. I quickened my pace, the light growing steadily brighter with each step I took. It seemed to pulse with a rhythmic energy, beckoning me forward with an irresistible allure. As I drew closer, the source of the light came into focus, a doorway, framed by an ethereal glow that seemed to radiate from within. It stood out against the darkness like a guiding star, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the desolation of the abyss. With a sense of hope, I approached the doorway, the light bathing me in its warm embrace. As I crossed the threshold, the darkness that had enveloped me for so long seemed to recede, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility. On the other side of the doorway was my bedroom. The familiar sight of my bed, the dresser, and the soft glow of the lamp filled me with a sense of surreal déjà vu. But as I glanced around the room, I noticed subtle differences, a sense of clarity and peace that had been absent before. The oppressive darkness that had plagued the haunted murder house was nowhere to be found, replaced instead by a comforting warmth that seemed to emanate from every corner. Confusion clouded my thoughts as I struggled to make sense of the situation. How could I be back in my own bedroom when just moments ago I had been standing on the threshold of a desolate abyss? And then, as if in answer to my unspoken question, I caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye, a glimmer of light shining through the window, casting dancing shadows on the walls. With a sense of dawning realization, I approached the window and peered outside, my breath catching in my throat as I took in the scene before me. The garden, the same lush, vibrant garden that I had seen on the other side of the doorway, stretched out before me, bathed in the soft light of the sun. Only something wasn't quite right. As I turned from the window, my heart skipped a beat as I beheld the radiant figures of Emily and her mother standing before me in the room. Their presence filled the space with an otherworldly glow. Like ethereal beings from a realm beyond mortal, they stood before me, bathed in the soft light that seemed to emanate from their very beings, their forms shimmering with an otherworldly luminescence. It was as if they had transcended the bounds of mortality, becoming something more than human, something divine. As I gazed upon them in awe, a sense of peace washed over me, filling the room with a tangible presence that enveloped me like a warm embrace. In their presence, I felt a profound sense of belonging, as if I had finally found my place in the world. "We were too late," Emily said as she pointed her finger. As Emily's words echoed through the room, a chill ran down my spine, and I followed her pointed finger to the bed. Dread coiled in the pit of my stomach as I beheld the sight before me. Lying motionless on the bed was a figure, a spectral form bathed in an eerie glow, its features twisted in agony. It was as if time itself had frozen, preserving the moment of death for all eternity. A wave of shock and disbelief washed over me as I recoiled in horror, my hand frozen in midair as I beheld the ghastly sight before me. There, lying on the bed, was my own lifeless form, its pallid features twisted in an expression of agony, wrists stained crimson with blood. I staggered back, the world spinning around me as I struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. How could this be? Was this some twisted trick of fate? A glimpse into a future that had yet to unfold? But as I stared at the figure before me, a dawning realization washed over me like a tidal wave. This was no glimpse into the future. This was a reflection of the past, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had once consumed me. Memories flooded my mind, fragments of a life filled with pain and despair, the whispers, the shadows, the relentless pursuit. They had all been manifestations of the turmoil that had raged within me, driving me to the brink of madness. And now, as I stood face to face with my own mortality, I knew that I could no longer deny the truth. The house had took me as well. I wander the halls of my tomb now, my spectral form bound to its cursed confines for eternity. I am no longer a prisoner of the darkness, but a guardian of its secrets, a witness to the tragedies that unfold within its walls. As I drift through the empty corridors, I can't help but wonder what awaits the next inhabitant of the old mansion. Will they heed the warnings whispered in the shadows, or will they fall victim to the same fate that befell me? I watch and wait, hoping that they are not a fool like I was, hoping that they can see through the facade and uncover the truth that lies hidden beneath its surface. For deep within its corridors lies the key to setting us all free, the truth behind the tragedies that have plagued the house for generations, the sins that have tainted its walls with blood and despair. And as I stand vigil in the darkness, I know that I will do whatever it takes to guide the next inhabitant on their journey, to ensure that they do not suffer the same fate that I did. For in the house, redemption is possible, but only for those brave enough to confront the darkness and face the demons of the past. And as I watch and wait, I cling to the hope that one day, someone will come along who is worthy of setting us all free. Story 6. I'm being hunted. This is a warning for you. I'm going to say this up front. This is the first time I'm telling this story. I never wanted to bring this up with any of my family and friends, and while it may be because I think they would never believe me, I never want to think about this again in my life. But now I have no choice, and I'm just tired of it all, and I can't figure out why this happened. I just need this to end before something bad happens. This started when I was working full-time at a restaurant, growing up in New York City, New York. I've got used to many different people daily, and I mean any type of person you could think of. Whatever you can think of has come and gone, and I could deal with it. But that also makes things harder since I'm the backbone and had me working. Anyways, on one of the late-night shifts, my best friend Adrian had shown up with another person with him, my girlfriend. He had always been a brother to me, and we've gone through it all to stay together. He's got a new girlfriend while I'm currently seeing someone as well. That night I saw him and my girl paying a visit to my work to mess with me while I was scrubbing a table that had puke on it. Yo, Adrian called me out. Your girl was thinking of hosting a little house party. Can't you tell me after work? Well, that's the thing. We're all going tonight. Don't you see I'm already dealing with enough? Wait, and you're going now? It's going to be late by the time I clock out. I also got a pack since you're nice enough to tell me last minute. Sorry, it was last minute, my girl said. I immediately smiled at her gently after wishing Adrian get hit by a car, and I laughed in the background. My dad's friend was thinking of demolishing the place, but I asked them if we could use it for a get-together. I'm bringing all my friends. It's so nice. It has a giant backyard pool and a game room. We are all bringing board games and drinks. It's going to be a 4-day thing, she said with a beaming smile I couldn't get enough. Adrian laughed. Yeah, I just had to come. As I was polishing the table, I looked at the clock. It was 5 minutes before 11 p.m., and they were going tonight, they said. Wait, tonight? It was that thought that kicked in for me. And if I had to say, it was the point where things started going downhill from there. I never had a gut feeling this strong and sinister, like my senses were shooting up through the roof. It was unnerving because this was supposed to be the greatest idea ever. working hard, and then having several shots at a luxurious place with my crush and best friend. I couldn't leave the offer, which makes this feeling all too difficult. And looking back at it, I wish I listened to my fatigue. But even then, I wouldn't know what would have happened to me. All right. Sure. Listen, I need to get back to work. But I'll see you. Where's it at? They told me to take the subway because it was practically across the state. Now I was annoyed at this stupid dilemma to end my night, but what I'm about to mention is something I never understand why. It all went downhill from there. There was a man that was sitting behind me the entire time. He was finishing up his plate taken by my co-worker and drank his water as we glanced at each other. He looked to be in his 20s. He had jet black hair that was slicked back with some shiny gel and a slim but sturdy tanned face. He was wearing something very elegant, like a tuxedo with a draping coat. He looked lean and fit as well, with some of the straightest posture I've ever seen. This dude did not look like he belonged in a restaurant where some kids would run around like it's a requirement here. But again, it's New York. He may as well be a model, a perfect cast for a superhero movie, or some shit. The trains are empty as of now, vacant and not a single soul for peace. It'll do your world good. All of us turned when he spoke. I don't know about everyone else, but I felt a sudden hit of sadness, almost like I was hit with a sense of impending doom, and I just realized I could never escape. I never experienced anything like this, so I had no idea what was going on. He continued, "Have you ever traveled all the way there? To that specific area? I reckon you all bid caution." The two were silenced, since they were very confused. "Look, man, I appreciate your concern, but we're sort of busy right now. I tried to keep an act just to make things easier, but I wish I could have handled that better, because I could have sworn his eyes turned darker and he made a slight frown. It was like he watched me with eyes like a wolf or something, ready to kill me. I felt trapped. I'll leave you alone to do whatever you want. But a word of advice, you should listen very carefully. That is," he stood up. His eyes didn't move anywhere else. "Take that vacation before you break in ways you never knew you could. It's always the ignorant that dies the easiest. Don't make that day earlier than it should be, although some due dates are well deserved. Who knows? Really, it's the numbers that always speak. Then the cattle that struggles. The bloodshed is not all what you think. Idiot." He paid for his meal and left. The three of us were stuck in this weird situation of what to think. "What the fuck was that?" Adrian said. "Anyways, look, we're all gonna head there. Hey, you're all right?" I nodded and told them I needed to get back to work. They hesitantly left, but everything got weirder when my manager came by after they left. For context, she had to be the best manager I knew so far. She wasn't on the nose with everything and was helping other people to do their jobs. And while she had arguments with other managers and employees before, she never did anything against them. She even gave me the day off so I could be on a date with someone who'd eventually be my crush. I'm going to miss her once I move on with something else. This was the first time I saw her face pale. "You know him?" She almost stuttered. If someone who was the most collected person in this group reacted to the man like this, you can tell how things were going down from there. "I don't know, and I don't want to talk about it," I said. "I just wanted to go to the house and enjoy my time off. You can clock out right now. Please be safe," she said. But our last words still stuck with me if I had to think about her. "That man's been coming here every day for a while now. You didn't notice him?" "I never seen him before. This was the first time. He called your full name this morning when he sat at that same spot. I think he wanted to talk." I left promptly without further talking about it. My mouth felt dry, my head was spinning, and I thought I was going to vomit. I swear to you that I've never seen that man, nor heard of him call my full name, which only a few would know anyway. Sure, I may not be aware of my surroundings, especially if I'm working. People aren't my main concern when it comes with getting paid to do a job, but I could definitely remember something as strange as him. It took me a while once I calmed down out of the restaurant to understand what situation I was in. Go home and rest it off, or forget it all and deal with the worst hangover I could think of. I'll be honest, I wouldn't know what to do if I went home. Would that man be waiting for me? What did he want? What did I do that pissed him off? In haste, I decided it was best just to take the subway. My mind was not feeling right. I thought once I get there I could pay for some clothes over there. There should be some thrift store nearby, right? Walking alone at night was the most unsettling thing I could ever put myself through because of that man. But at the time, I think I was thrown so off that my logic was rattled. I ended up finding myself at the subway entrance, going downstairs slowly, holding onto that guardrail like I was waiting for something to jump behind me. I felt like I was paranoid as hell. Reasoning with my fight or flight state wouldn't make things better. So I followed with my plan and at least had my guard up. 11 p.m. in New York is a gamble on its own. But I couldn't tell what's wrong or right. When I made it down to the bottom of the steps, I pulled my shirt to hover over my nose when I smelled the worst thing possible. At that moment, I couldn't take it anymore, and I threw up to the side. I made my way straight to the subway after puking my guts. I was completely lost, confused, and extremely scared. My senses were almost gone, and I was left with choices I could barely make on my own. Everything in my peripherals was a blur, since I had the most intense tunnel vision ever. Just as I was power walking, for less than a minute, I heard a loud bang from behind. It didn't sound like a gun, but like a large object hitting the wall or something. It sounded distant, but I froze, staring at the floor. I heard some voices in front of me like they were in the deepest part of a hallway. From what I remembered, they all sounded like guys, but the weirdest part was that they sounded the same. It was as if someone was talking at different pitches with the same voice as an experienced voice actor would do. But I think what made me terrified of the dangers was that the same type of voice from different people came from the guy from the restaurant. One of them had a raspy and loud tone that was yelling in anger. The other had a more high-pitched tone, sounding apologetic while the raspy voice yelled at him. Were there two different people that sounded like one by coincidence? Then, it sounded like they walked away while still yelling at each other, and I stood in place for a while, waiting. After a moment of silence, I told myself I was just imagining things, and it appeared real because I was scared and sick. Maybe I ate something bad in the break room fridge, or I didn't heat my food properly. I thought of all possible reasons why I felt like the world didn't feel real. I slowed down, and as my breath stabilized, my thoughts began to become more organized. I walked slower, leaning against the wall in case some came up, watching every item to use for escape, cover, and even defense. For a while, everything was silent in the tunnels. While it isn't uncommon to be alone on the subways, the way that things changed from chaos to calm was unnerving. But I still told myself I'd rather be scared than killed. I didn't know what that noise was back there, but I had to stop caring. I'm going to enjoy my time off. I have to, at this point. It felt like minutes with how I was walking. So I slowly increased my pace as I got comfortable, and there wasn't any scare. But as time went on smoothly, that was when I started noticing the smaller things around me. There was no security in sight, at most. It was the camera, but I couldn't care less. No one else was present besides the voices that I heard, and everything was dead quiet. The only sounds I could hear were the fluorescent lighting above me, and some flies and mice scurrying across me. Maybe it was because I felt like my life was in danger, but let me tell you, I never paid attention to every single thing before me in my life. And that smell was the most outstanding. The same stench that made me puke came back, still as strong as ever. Now, I've dealt with trash, shit, and other putrid things you'd find at the bottom of a restaurant dumpster at the heart of some of the busiest cities in the country, let alone smell them. So the fact this made me react was bizarre. To make matters worse, this was not a one-time thing. Every hallway that led in a different direction from the one I was taking had that smell when I passed by. My thoughts were all thinking of whatever it was, and I sure as hell was not going to visit to find out. I prayed to God that I wouldn't take a detour. My eyes were all glued to one thing, and one thing only, that fucking subway. At last, I made it. As a New Yorker, I was a regular there, so I jumped over those turnstiles and made my way to the subway, feeling relieved that nothing happened in between. I looked down at my clothes, which made me feel so gross that I'd need a baptism rather than a shower. Then, the expected echoes of the train grew stronger as I waited. I felt like things were going smoothly. I saw the headlights, and I could feel that stupid smile on my face. But it dropped when I turned and saw the clock. 2:07 a.m. I swear to you, I had no idea how I took that long. Sure, I walked slowly, but it shouldn't take about 3 hours. I felt like I was there for at most 40 minutes. I bet Adrian and my girlfriend were thinking I should stay home. I felt guilty, but most of all, I wanted to get out of here. Thinking about them made me feel safe, and I want to see them. The doors opened and I immediately went in. I looked around and there was no one on the seats. Well, that's relieving, but not for long. Since I know people who work super early, I'd probably have my nap interrupted. I slumped on my seat, trying to make a plan in my head, but I was too tired and scared to even think straight. The doors closed, and I closed my eyes to rub them, taking a second rest from those damn lights. When I opened them, I still couldn't see anything. I froze, and I reached my hand to feel that cold part of the seat, to at least know I was in reality. But I couldn't see it until it was super close to me, after making sure I didn't take a nap. This was a blackout that happened at the same time I closed my eyes. I cursed and kicked the seat in front of me in anger. Realizing that the train was not budging, I reached into my pockets to get my phone, something I should have done long ago, but I heard rustling in the back seats behind me. Someone sighed heavily. I swear to God that I didn't see anyone there. I definitely would have even seen a small child from that distance. So how did I see him? The doors needed to be forced open since there was no power, and I didn't see any flashlight to guide him in the dark. So how? The only thought, and I think this remains true, was that this guy was on the very corner of the train in a ball, huddled in a tight ball. I heard laughing then from the same type of voice. This was not the raspy, high-pitched, or clear tone of the restaurant. This one was quieter and subtle with a low tone, almost close to a whisper, but everything else was audible, almost like his voice was close to my ear. I didn't turn around. I just sat there, realizing that my anger woke whoever was hidden and sleeping. The laugh wasn't something crazy, but almost mocking. "Who do we have here?" The voice sounded. Even as my eyes could adjust to the darkness, I couldn't make out everything. I didn't see any flashlight or something the guy could use to make his way since it was pitch black, but he was making his way down easily. Every step he took was slow. It felt like a minute between every placed foot that echoed. It was all I could hear that was coming towards me. I only sat there. I didn't know what to do, or what was going to happen if I tried running. I was trapped, and I only hoped that he didn't do anything to me. The lights went on, but it flickered so violently that I couldn't see anything. From inside and out of the train, my eyes were becoming disoriented and I had to shield them. At this point, I couldn't do anything but let the man do whatever he planned. Then, the sound of the buzzing lights went back on, through my hands. I watched to the sides, through the windows. It was only darkness. I couldn't see anything except for my reflection, and the man that was watching me. From the reflection alone, I could see that he was wearing a dark face mask covering his mouth. He was wearing a beanie that covered his messy long hair that traveled to the end of his neck. He wore a black and red flannel, a black shirt, denim jeans, and green shoes. I went silent, staring at the reflecting window to see if he was going to acknowledge me. I saw him taking another step away from me, but my heart sank when I saw he was slowly sitting on the chair in front of me, leaning towards me. "Hey." Despite the voice being low, I felt my body going cold, and I started to feel uneasy again. "Hey." It was like my body had a physical reaction again. At this point, I thought this was the same man wearing a different set of clothes. It was the only reason I could believe after all this time. I turned, and I spotted the details that made me want to run. The guy had dark, crazy-looking eyes, jet black hair, tan skin, and an athletic build. The only difference from the restaurant was that he had a slight beard just protruding from the mask. I thought the man was purposely wearing a different type of clothing just to mess with me. What am I supposed to believe at this point? Or, look at you. You're shivering, coated in fear like you should. Praying for the first time since you're in danger for the first time. How exciting. Fear, cry, tremble like you're about to die. Because you are. I was in shock as his voice was slightly raised. He was laughing and sounded even more insane. He kept watching me, and I was waiting to see what he'd do. Then, the light flickered violently again, and he reacted to it. It's time to celebrate the passing of the light, the withering of safety, and the chaining of your farewells with a delicious anchor. I want to see your eyes for an eternity. The lights disoriented my visions again, but I saw him through the flashing, dancing violently. He was flailing his arms and legs while still making sure I couldn't escape. Please, please! Oh, my favorite music. My entire being is ready. Let your death be in my shrine. Death. Get him already! Watching in shock as I barely could see thanks to the lights, and his movements were blinding fast. Then, I felt a jolt of pain hit the back of my head. I was hit so hard that I fell to the ground, closing my eyes as I wrapped my head tightly, trying to cover the sounds of the chaos I got myself in. I screamed, trying to drown out all the noises, but the lights turned back on, and everything went silent. I expected to see the man when I inched my head forward, staying on the floor to see what he was going to do with me. I didn't see him in front of me, but he was further away to the end of the car, standing completely still with his head tilting. Open the fuck up. Maggot! Open up or I'll make it uglier than your face. It was the raspy voice again, sounding with thunderous bangs from the windows. I quickly turned and saw the figure in front of the door that was ramming his fists into the window, shattering it with just a couple of punches. I knew at this point I was in danger. This man had the same look as the other two men so far. Same height, same build, same skin color, same colored hair, and the same type of voice that is just changed in pictures and whatever. This one's clothing had a tight grey shirt, black cargo pants, combat boots, and a black ball cap. He had a stubble, shorter than the flannel guy, and the muscles were on full display. I was convinced that he was able to force the subway doors out the way, but since he literally bent them, they weren't able to be tucked away fully. You just had to make it difficult. You fucker! We said not to keep that house and you all ignored. You need to die! Get thee over, you bastard! I heard the other man in the mask laughing. In my peripheral vision, it looked like he was hanging onto the rails above, his body almost dangling as he was climbing up while I was backing up from the floor. I can't taste it. I can smell it. You must have smelt the ones back there. Isn't that the most beautiful scent in the world? I want more! Pleasure from the cold hands to your throat, and let your thread burn in the feast. I always, from that morning, remembered how everything happened in perfect detail because, and I may be wrong, but the very strong smell was from the dead bodies. This man that was yelling had a face that I could tell that wanted to kill me by using his bare hands while cursing his brains out. The other guy was crazy enough to see me about to get killed, and looking back, it might be the sophisticated bastard that planned this. But I focused more on running, and I used this opportunity to run before the door violently closed again. As I stepped out of the car, I saw the two men there. Now their eyes were watching me, but the enraged man yelled some more, and he moved to the other door, kicking and punching with the most powerful strikes I've ever seen. I turned and I was thinking of ways to run and disorient them. Thinking that the lights would flicker again, I saw a straight line of obstacles and doors that led to my escape. I booked it, and I ran as fast as I could while the guy broke free and started running. He was faster, making the sound of his hard boots echoing louder the closer he got. I was throwing trash cans, moving between poles, and doing whatever moves I could think of, but he was still on my tail. Then the light started flickering, messing with my eyesight again before I went to one of the doors. There was a trash can next to the door, so I picked it up and swung it to the man. I clearly hit him since I heard him groan, but I didn't wait, even in the slightest chance of me dying. I heard the subway cart moving, and through the violent lights, I decided to use one of those indents in the wall to flush my body to let the subway pass. I made sure as I jumped, landed, and stayed still that I did it perfectly. Sure enough, I closed my eyes and I could feel the force of the vehicle almost brushing past me. It passed me, but it stopped slowly. The light stopped flashing and stayed steady. Unfortunately, the view from the last window was clear enough for them to see me from the inside, and I could see them. I didn't want to move because there was another different man that walked out of the train. It was another doppelganger of the past three, only he was wearing a bright red sweater, a white shirt, black jeans, and Converse shoes. His hair was long and unkempt in a ponytail, but his face was clean shaven like the businessman. He was smiling as he clapped his hands together. Whoa, that was fun. Wait a second. Where's the rest? I probably messed with the lights too much. I thought he would kill him once he was in the subway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something. Damn, out of battery. Well, we'll get him next time. Surely now is definitely not the time. Oh, hey you three. We gotta get going. Should we get the train going? How was it for you guys? That voice was the lightest, the one that was apologizing at the raspy. Then I saw them coming together to board the train without looking at me. I saw all four, including the businessman. They all talked and bicker amongst themselves, but I stopped paying attention since my main goal after the train was to get out. The subway left, and I immediately booked it. I continuously ran all the way to my home, ignoring everything until I got home. I didn't bother checking the news if the bodies were discovered, or if the damages were recorded. They most likely were, but I don't care about it because things got more serious. I called my work, my friends, and my girlfriend to tell them that I couldn't attend for anything, but I never told them why. I wasn't hurt at all, so I couldn't fake a sickness. But would anyone believe me? Would I want to say it like it was real? It may have been, but I can't even tell anymore. I have a feeling it was all orchestrated from nature itself. But the main reason I'm telling you all this is because my friend was taking a selfie from their trip there. And in one of the photos, I immediately recognized. There was the man with the ponytail, smiling and having fun with my friends with beer in his hand. I'm going to call Adrian up about this, but if you ever see one of them, avoid them no matter what. If they acknowledge you, your fate is decided for whatever reason. They know who I am, and who are my connections. It's only a matter of time before I'm done for. Enjoy life, because you never know what is coming for you for whatever reason. Story 7. Something ruined my son's elementary school Halloween party. It's been a couple of minutes since I last heard it, but I know we're definitely not alone. It's impossible to say how much time we have left, but I'll try and document everything that has happened so far. It's my duty, in case we don't make it out alive, to explain how it all began. For 2 weeks, the kids at my son's school had been preparing for the upcoming Halloween party. It might surprise some of you, but Halloween wasn't that popular in our neck of the woods due to it being a part of a Bible Belt. So, naturally, the idea met some resistance, but in the end, common sense prevailed. Whatever some folks might think, it was not an event put together to celebrate dark forces, just an innocent event that allowed kids to play pretend for one night. Earlier today, at 5 p.m., I was standing in the hallway waiting for Caleb. Poor little guy had been nervous all week. Not only was it the first time he had ever attended a party, but he was also going to ask his crush, Nora, to dance. While it was endearing, I couldn't help but feel sad that his mother wasn't with us. Caleb was 3 years old when Amy passed away in an accident. She had just left work, walking on foot back to her car, when a drunk driver mowed her down on the crosswalk. Her injuries were so severe that she died before the ambulance arrived. Time might heal most wounds, but the void left by a loved one never fully heals. I checked the time. 10 minutes had passed. What was taking so long? I looked up towards the stairs and was about to call out, when Caleb finally stepped into view. He was sporting a skeleton onesie, the plastic mask resting on top of his head. There you are. You ready to go? I said. You think Nora is going to like my costume? Caleb was visibly nervous. I know she will, but hey, we gotta get going. It was fairly dark when we finally got moving. On our way, I could see that there were maybe 5 or 6 houses that were decorated, which was more than I had anticipated for our small town, as you might expect. There was no signs of any kids trick-or-treating. To my surprise, the parking lot was almost packed once we finally arrived. From behind the wheel, I could see adults with their kids inside the school cafeteria, which was where the festivities would take place. The windows were decorated with garlands depicting ghosts and bats, as well as grinning pumpkins alongside black and orange balloons. I turned off the engine and started reaching for the door. "All right, kiddo, you ready to—" "Dad?"
Yeah.
I paused. "Yeah? Do you think Mommy is with us now?" I'm not a religious person, not even agnostic. Yet, I was too cowardly to tell him that his mother simply didn't exist anymore. Well, that's maybe not entirely true, as there was still a part of me that wished that she was still out there, somewhere, but that was just wishful thinking, a mental crutch that prevented me from breaking down whenever she was brought up. "Yeah, I know she is." We embraced. Caleb sighed, content that his mother was still very much present. I felt horrible for lying yet again, but over the years I had convinced myself that I did it to protect him. Once we stepped out, I locked the doors before we began making our way toward the cafeteria. On either side of the entrance stood carved-out pumpkins, their eyes and mouths glowing from the electric candles placed inside. Above them hung 2 glow-in-the-dark skeletons. Behind the glass portion of the door sat a poster addressing tonight's event. It read, "Halloween Party," in big, bold letters, beyond information regarding entry fees, opening and closing time, etc. Every classic monster, as well as some new ones I was unaware of, adorned the festive placard. Upon entering, we were greeted by Tom and Jenny, 2 of the parents that had graciously pitched in to help out. There wasn't a kid in sight that wasn't dressed up. Zombies, witches, ghosts, werewolves. Everyone was there. As we had crossed the threshold, we were met by a tapestry of cobwebs, plastic pumpkins, and numerous other Halloween-related trinkets. On one of the walls hung several hand-drawn pictures of different monsters, phantasms, and beings. All the chairs and tables in the cafeteria had been cleared out to leave room for dance and play. The adults had also built a stall where kids could buy snacks. To the right, in the far corner, Alex, a guy whose little sister was in the same class as Caleb, was setting up the sound system. I went around, saying hello to everyone, while Caleb got together with some friends. The atmosphere was great, but it was then that an all-too-familiar voice cut through the nostalgia. This is nothing more than an unhealthy fascination with evil.
Yeah.
It was none other than my old principal, Mr. Jones. Slowly, I turned around to face him. His cold, grey eyes glared at me from underneath his greying, bushy eyebrows. I could swear that he was still wearing that same old suit from when I was young. Still reeked heavily of stale cigarette smoke. Apart from his thinning scalp, he hadn't really changed. Still bitter and bumptious, a bona fide Mr. Scrooge. I forced a smile. Can't be that bad. Mr. Jones. The kids seem to be enjoying themselves, and at the end of the day, isn't that what's most important?
Yeah.
Mr. Jones furrowed his brow. His stare became more intense, and for a second, it felt as if I was back in the principal's office, awaiting my judgment. To him I was a pest, an insect he could obliterate with ease. Then, he grinned wide, exposing his nicotine, yellow teeth. Well, if it isn't Daniel Price, how you've grown. So, this kind of nonsense amuses you? Can't say that I'm all that surprised.
Yeah.
The old fossil remembered me, even after all those years. I strained my jaw tightly before responding. I'm impressed you still remember.
Yeah.
The old bastard's smile grew even wider, exposing his dentures, a mishmash of quicksilver and gold. He then looked over the room, disgust glimmering in his cold stare. Just clean up once you're done. I'll be back, just to make sure things are done accordingly. See you again, Mr. Price.
Yeah.
I nodded before excusing myself and left to talk with some of the parents. He could probably tell that I was irritated, judging from his smug smirk he gave in response. Thankfully, Mr. Jones left the vicinity. The Halloween party could finally begin. The cafeteria soon transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. The kids danced while indulging sugary treats. However, it didn't take long before we needed to refill, and I got tasked with fetching more snacks and drinks from the boys' locker room over at the school's gym. I complied, and after receiving the keys, I left. It was already dark outside and raining slightly. My footsteps echoed across the deserted schoolyard. The moment the music had more or less faded, an uncanny silence took its place. For whatever reason, I was on edge. Once I reached the building, I looked around to ensure myself I was alone. Call it a sixth sense. But already at that point, I felt that something was off. However, I ended up brushing off the feeling before unlocking and entering the gym. The fluorescent tubes blinked to life after I flipped the light switch, revealing the dimly lit interior. I looked around. To my right, the girls' and boys' locker rooms. To the left, a corridor veering to the right, leading you straight to the gym teacher's office. The gym itself, as well as a door leading out to the gym's athletic track. I went straight for the boys' locker room. Once there, I picked up 2 cases of drinks and 2 bags filled with snacks. It was when I was about to leave that I heard what sounded like someone fiddling with a door. I stopped and listened. I hadn't mistaken myself. What I heard was the rattling sound of a door handle being violently yanked. Whoever they were trying to force themselves in through the back door. Carefully, I put down what I was carrying. The racket showed no sign of letting up. Although I had no backup, I decided to go and investigate. As I was about to turn the corner, the sound ceased immediately. I peeked. Both doors were closed, and I couldn't see anyone beyond the frosted glass portion of the back door. It touched the door handle, just to make sure it wasn't damaged. Everything seemed to be fine, but just to make sure I unlocked and opened the door, just a crack. The athletic track was shrouded in shadows, and even with the ground lighting off, I could tell that the field seats were unoccupied. In the distance, I could see a trail leading further away into an area cluttered with houses. I saw no movement. While locking the back door, I began recalling overhearing some of the parents complaining about teenagers hanging out around the school at odd hours, drinking beers and smoking. So, that's what I chalked it up to, a bunch of bored teens. Relieved, I closed and locked the door, but as I was about to head back, some started yanking at the handle again. I cursed under my breath and spun around. Behind the glass, I could see the distorted shape of a person. I couldn't make out any distinguishing features, but I could tell that their posture was odd. It seemed as if the shoulders were raised in a perpetual shrug. I'm not gonna lie, it freaked me out. Back off. Before I call the police.
Yeah.
The second the word police left my mouth, the door handle stopped moving. I studied the figure, ready to call out again. When they started backing out of view, I'm not sure if it was the frosted glass warping my perception, but just before the individual disappeared, it looked as if they hitched up their shoulders even further. Clearly, I was seeing things, but just to make sure they weren't coming back, I yelled at them that I would be back. Only this time I would not be alone. I didn't get a reply, which I at the time saw as a strong indication that they had left. After checking the door one last time, I went back and picked up the stuff I had come for. I locked up the gym and speed-walked back to the cafeteria, every now and then looking over my shoulder just to make sure I wasn't being followed. No one there. While relieved, that same creeping feeling from before started finding its way back under my skin. Once I reached the cafeteria, I caught sight of Sam, one of the parents, smoking a cigarette. He must have heard me, because he looked my way. There you are. Where the hell have you been?
Nah.
I didn't say anything at first, just asked him to keep the door open for me so that I could unload. Once I had unpacked, I stepped outside to talk to Sam. The incident over at the gym still lingered in the back of my head, pricking every nerve in my body. I needed something to take off the edge. I'd been smoke-free for 4 months, but ended up relenting, asking Sam if I could bum a smoke. Thought you quit, he replied, surprise in his voice. Having said that, he still handed me one. I thanked him, lit up and took a deep drag. I felt better already. Yeah, I did. But after what I went through, I really needed one. Yeah? What happened? Sam said, now seemingly worried. A couple of kids tried to get into the gym, but I told them off. I took another drag, but I gotta be honest, it was pretty creepy.
Yeah.
Sam chuckled, smoke escaping from his mouth and nostrils. I get that, but hey, teens will be teens. They're probably just trying to mess with you. Hell, even I get bored of living in buttfuck nowhere at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, I replied. But don't you think we should go back? Just to check?
Yeah.
Maybe. Sam scratched his chin. But we should probably wait. Don't want to scare the kids, and besides, as long as we stick together, we're fine.
Yeah.
He was right, but I guess he could tell I was still somewhat on edge as he walked up to me and put a hand on my shoulder. It's gonna be fine, David. But tell you what, if it makes you feel any better, how about you? Me and Brady head over to the gym after we're done cleaning. Just take a quick gander, and if we notice anything, we'll call the cops. All right?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam. Reassured, we headed back inside. But before entering the cafeteria, I made sure to shove my mouth full with mint-flavored bubble gums to camouflage the smell from Caleb. The evening went on. Kids bounced around, high on sugar. Parents chit-chatted about work and upcoming vacations. At some point I see Caleb standing by himself, looking out one of the windows. A parent's worst fear kicked in. Did someone say something to upset him? I was well aware that bullying did happen at his school, but not to what extent. Quickly, I beelined across the dance floor while trying not to knock anyone over, straight towards Caleb. Once I reached him, I knelt down. Hey, little man, you okay?
Yeah.
I half expected to see tears in his eyes, but when he looked at me, I could see that he was smiling. Yeah, why?
Yeah.
Taken aback, I replied. Oh, nothing. What are you up to?
Yeah.
Without breaking eye contact and still smiling, he responds, talking with Mom. Hearing my child claiming that he was speaking with his dead mother would have creeped out most parents. This wasn't the case for us, though. In fact, shortly after his mother died, Caleb kept telling me that she still read him goodnight stories. Last time this happened was maybe 5 years ago. So, in that regard, it was nothing too alarming. But his reply had thrown me off. Maybe he was speaking with his mother because he felt left out. Okay, but don't you want to hang out with your friends instead of standing here, all alone?
Yeah.
But I'm not alone. Mom is outside. You always say that she's with us. He then pointed at the window. Internally, I cursed myself for keeping up this charade for as long as I had. Yeah, I know, I sighed. But I really think you should hang out with your buddies. Mom, she's not going anywhere. Okay, don't you think she would want you to have fun tonight? Weren't you supposed to ask Nora to dance?
Yeah.
The second her name was mentioned, Caleb ripped his gaze from the window and bolted into the crowd of kids, presumably to find Nora. Before he disappeared, I called out that I would tell Alex to change the music to something more suitable. I made my way to the improvised DJ booth, but soon realized no one was there to man it. After asking around, I found out that Alex was last seen outside, talking on the phone, not wanting to keep my son waiting any longer. I went outside. Luckily, it didn't take long before I spotted Alex pacing around the parking lot, phone pressed tight to his ear. I stopped in my tracks and waited for him to finish his call before waving. The moment he hung up, he looked up and waved at me. Hey, sorry about that. I was busy talking with my girlfriend. You good, Mr. Price?
Yeah.
I waved back and started walking towards him. Halfway, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. I stopped and turned to face the road leading up to the school area. It was a rather narrow, asphalted road lined with light posts and a couple of houses. No lights were on in the windows. I was about to keep walking, but that was when I detected movement again, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. I looked again, and that's when I saw it. Something that I can't quite explain, due to the darkness and the dull glow of the light posts. I wasn't sure what I was seeing, On first glance, it reminded of a hunched-over dog, but it was arching its back the way a cat does when feeling threatened. But the more I looked, the more puzzled I felt. Firstly, it was far larger than any dog or cat I had ever seen, maybe the size of an average male. Secondly, and I could be wrong, but it almost looked as if this animal was wearing clothing. No matter how hard I squinted my eyes, trying to discern any facial features, I couldn't make out its face. I'm not sure how long I had been standing there, completely perplexed, before I could make out Alex's voice. It sounded distant and far away, as if my head was encased in a soundproofed bubble. "Mr. Price, are you all right?" My eyes remained locked on the odd animal, and I was about to call Alex's attention to that thing before it blended into the unlit environment. Something about how it moved, as if its limbs were disjointed and not attached in a way that made any logical sense, made me shiver. Once again, Alex tried to reach through to me, this time by grabbing my shoulders and shaking me while raising his voice. "David!" "What's wrong?" "Talk to me!" I'm not sure if it was that he dropped all formalities and called me by my first name that made me snap out of it, or if it was due to him using physical force. Whatever the case, it brought me back. I saw something. An animal or, I don't know. Alex immediately started looking around, but of course, he saw nothing. Whatever I had seen was either long gone or still lurking around somewhere, observing us. Concerned, Alex turned to me. "Well, whatever it was, it's not there anymore." He paused and looked at me before continuing. "I know it might be a long shot, but Sam told me you caught a couple of kids trying to get into the gym. You don't think it was one of them trying to prank you?" I looked at him in confusion, not sure what he was getting at. Alex carried on. "I know Halloween might not be your thing, but that's what it's all about, scaring the crap out of each other. I bet they just wanted to get back at you." He was right. For all I knew, what I had seen could very well have been one of those kids playing dress-up to scare me. Well, it sure as hell worked, and I felt quite embarrassed that Alex had been around to see my reaction. That said, he didn't rub it in my face. Instead, he perked up. "Anyway, you were looking for me?" I shot one more nervous look towards the darkness. Once I was assured we were alone, I turned back to him. "Yeah, about the music. You think you could change it up? Maybe put on something a bit slower?" Alex smiled, as if he knew exactly why I had made my request. "Ah, so Caleb is ready to ask Nora for a dance." "How did you—" Alex grinned and lit a cigarette, one that he had started on, but never finished. "Oh, I know that look. I've been DJing long enough to be able to tell. Caleb's been circling her ever since the music started playing. The little dude just hasn't found his window of opportunity yet." I couldn't help but to chuckle. It was sweet and it made me soften up a bit, pushing away whatever odd experiences I'd had so far that evening. He was just like his old man when I was his age. "Great. So, what do you say? Want to head back and create some magic?" I said and checked my phone. 1 hour until closing time. It was now or never. "You bet, Mr. Price. They don't call me Dr. Love for nothing," he replied. "Excuse me?" I gave him a weird look. It's a joke, Mr. Price. Anyway, we should probably get going." Alex quickly put out his cigarette and set off towards the cafeteria. 5 minutes later, "I Will Always Love You," the Whitney Houston version, not the Dolly Parton original, was streaming out of the speakers. The dance floor cooled down significantly, and even some adults joined in. I looked around for Caleb until I noticed that he was already dancing with Nora. He was definitely bolder than I was when I was his age. Frankly, I was impressed. I stood and watched as the witch and skeleton gently rocked back and forth, smiling to myself. Whatever oddities I had experienced earlier that evening were now washed away. I felt content. The Halloween party had so far been a success. I slumped down in one of the empty chairs. I was just going to relax for the last hour or so before we would call it a night. That was when I noticed the small group of kids by one of the windows. Every now and then they would laugh while pointing at something out in the dark. I got curious and went over to them. When I was within arm's reach, a small girl dressed up as a princess turned and looked up at me. "You scared him away." She looked annoyed, a small scowl on her face. I didn't appreciate her tone, but kept it together. "Who are you talking about?" I asked calmly. "The principal. He's so funny." Another kid, dressed up as Dracula, chimed in. The principal? Was he back already? I couldn't help but feel nervous before brushing it off in order to remain cool and collected. The princess, whose name was Kelly, carried on. He was dancing and jumping really high. "Higher than Spider-Man!" All of the children giggled, and as soon as the song changed to something more energetic, they swarmed back to the dance floor. I remained stood by the window, confused. Soon I was joined by Sam and his wife, Chrissy. I ended up telling them about what had just happened. Chrissy raised her eyebrows while Sam chuckled, seemingly amused, before saying, "They were just pulling your leg." Man, still rattled up about the gym thing. "What gym thing?" Chrissy said, sounding concerned. "Eh?" "Nothing serious, just some teens messing around," Sam responding while discreetly winking at me. "Yeah," I said, laughing it off. "Hey, I'm just gonna head out and unwind. Be right back." Although he didn't say it out loud, Sam was right. I needed to get my shit together. After taking a leak, I grabbed my jacket and left. The schoolyard was empty. It was eerily quiet outside, almost as if the entire town was holding its breath. I contemplated whether or not I should take a brisk walk around the cafeteria to clear my head, when I caught sight of something, or rather, someone. A person was peeking out from behind the main school building. Due to the lack of light, other than a single lamppost, I couldn't make out their face. That said, it was their posture that really caught my attention. From where I was standing, it almost looked as if they were leaning backwards, exposing their upper body from around the corner. At first I was puzzled, but then I remembered what Alex had said. I bet it was those teenagers again, trying to scare me. For fuck's sake, didn't they have anything better to do? Time ticked by without anyone saying anything. Eventually, I lost my patience. "What do you want?" I should have said more, come across as more imposing, but my newfound fearlessness fizzled out the second the figure took a step forward. In the dull light, I could see that they were walking backwards, towards me. It soon became apparent to me that this was someone I knew, someone I had actually talked to earlier. It was none other than Mr. Jones, my old principal. He was wearing that same old suit, but it somehow looked ill-fitted, as if it had become too small for his frame. But the strangest and most chilling observation was the way his shoulders were raised, elevated, making it appear as if he had no neck, just like the person I had seen over at the gym. Unless Mr. Jones had completely given in to the spirit of Halloween and decided to prank me. None of this made any sense. Whatever the case, I couldn't stop staring at him approaching. His arms and legs were moving in such a way that it seemed as if they had been broken and then healed without any medical support. It was like watching a rag doll, grotesquely, yet somehow still gracefully, sauntering across the schoolyard. My brain desperately tried to make sense of what I was seeing while backing away towards the cafeteria. I had almost reached the entrance when Mr. Jones all of a sudden spoke to me, but it wasn't his voice that I was hearing. It was one from beyond the grave, one that I hadn't heard in 6 miserable, agonizing years. "Daniel." No, how was it even possible? Amy. I was there when they uncovered her body at the morgue. She was dead, torn and broken. Last time we spoke was when she had called me after work. "Heading home now. See you soon. Love you." I felt sick, delirious. The wound I was left with when she was ripped away from me ached and burned. Jones, that evil son of a bitch. My childhood years came flashing back. It was so long ago, but somehow he still hated me, wanted nothing more than to dig the knife deeper. That said, how could he mimic Amy so perfectly? None of this made any sense. It was then that something happened. something so terrifying that the fragmented mental images of Amy's mutilated corpse on the cold medical slab paled in comparison. With a wet, cracking sound, Joan's back contorted unnaturally, putting him in a revolting bridge position while still facing me. In some strange, uncanny way, it reminded me of when a cat is readying itself to pounce its prey. From this position, I could see his head. It had sunk down to chest level and was hanging limply, yet the eyes were fixed on me. The face was drained of colo, closely resembled a mask. The skin was pulled taut around the cheeks and forehead, but looked almost baggy around the mouth, nose and chin. It was when I saw the blood that I realized that this thing was wearing Mr. Jones's face as a crude disguise. The deathly pale lips slowly parted, and from that disgusting mouth, Amy's voice slithered, piercing my heart. "Daniel, come to me." I didn't scream or beg for my life. I just started running. Behind me, I could hear the tearing of flesh and tissue, as if the human husk no longer could contain the thing wearing it. A blood-curdling shriek, an unearthly concoction of human and something else, cut through the air. Before I managed to slam the door behind me, I heard the intense pattering of too many feet, appendages or whatever it was, hammering against the pavement. Without making sure whether or not it was still chasing me, I started barricading the door with benches, chairs, whatever I could get my hands on. Suddenly, someone grabbed my shoulder, hard. "Daniel, what the hell is going on? What are you doing?" It was Sam. I hadn't heard him, nor the other parents, approaching me, judging from their wide-eyed gazes. They must have thought I was insane. However, that didn't budge me. I pulled away from Sam and proceeded building the barricade. My muscles burned with the rush of adrenaline. My heart was pounding like a drum, and my brain was screaming to me to keep going. Any attempts to reach through to me were ignored. Somewhere, beneath the sound of angry and confused adults, I could hear the cries and sobs of children. I don't know how long it took before the noise of Alex's angry words got my attention. "Fucking hell. Daniel, you're scaring Caleb." The second I heard my son's name, I let go off everything and turned around. Amidst the crowd of teary-eyed kids, I soon managed to make out Caleb's face. He was no longer wearing his skeleton mask. His eyes, filled with fear, bore into mine. Once I saw how scared he was, a pang of guilt surged through me, but that guilt was soon pushed aside when I, in my peripheral vision, noticed Sam starting to pick apart the blockade. Without a second thought, I grabbed one of his arms. "Don't! Just leave it alone!" My voice was booming. He looked shocked, then angry, but I didn't care. I was willing to fight him to prevent whatever was out there from coming on. We stared at each other, but before any of us could say anything, a loud thump startled us. It had come from the roof. This was soon followed by the heavy scurries of something moving rapidly. As soon as that thing belted out yet another blood-curdling shriek, I sprung into action. I bolted straight towards my son, scooped him up and made for the cafeteria. It didn't take long before everyone else got on the same bandwagon. The music was still blasting in the background, but everyone, including me, were too panicked to shut it off. Parents were discussing to the point of shouting. Kids were crying, confused and scared, having no idea what the hell was going on. Something had to be done, so I made my way to a secluded corner, still hanging on to Caleb. Once there, I grabbed my phone and called up Paul, a cop who lived in the area. Yeah, I could have called 911, but for some reason I thought this was a better option. Maybe, just maybe someone could come to our aid quicker. There are many things that I could have done different, but I was desperate and above all, scared shitless. 3 signals later, he picked up. "Yeah, this is Paul." "Paul," I shouted. "It's David Price. You gotta get over here. Bring the entire force. The military. I don't care. We need help." It was quiet on the line before Paul replied, noticeably taken aback. "Whoa, calm down. I can barely hear what you're saying. Can you please turn down the music? Where the hell are you?" I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I'm at the kids' Halloween party. Someone... Paul suddenly cut me off. I stopped talking, and soon when I heard a sound on his end, it was faint at first, but it appeared as if someone was ringing his doorbell. Paul sighed. Damn it. Can you hold on? I gotta get this. Hang tight. Still on his cell phone, he made his way to the front door. Paul, please, we really need your help. Can't you just... Paul didn't reply. Instead, he unlocked the door and opened it. Then, for whatever reason, he went quiet. Hello? You still there? I said, now lowering my voice. A few more seconds ticked by before I could make out a voice. But it wasn't Paul. It was an elderly woman saying something unintelligible. Paul, what's going on? Finally, he responded, but his tone was strange, if I were to describe it. He sounded dismayed. Who was he talking to? David. He stopped. I wasn't sure, but it almost sounded as if he was on the verge of tears. Paul. I spoke softly as to not push him over the edge. Who's at the door? It's... Mom. She came has come home. I felt a lump of shock and disgust clog up my throat. But that's impossible. She's... Suddenly, an inhuman scream erupted through the speaker, after which the call ended abruptly. It had been so violent, so loud, that I'd almost lost my grip around Caleb. I couldn't believe what Paul had said just seconds ago. You see, his mother had died of cancer about a year ago. For crying out loud, I attended the funeral. In my confusion, I looked around, seeing that other people were trying to make calls as well, but for whatever reason, it was as if they couldn't get through. I could overhear them saying that it was as if something was blocking the signal. I checked the phone again. I had a signal, but no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't reach anyone. Seconds ticked by. I could feel the pre-assure in the air, the agitation and the terror. The cafeteria was now a pressure cooker boiling with all of our fears. And then all hell broke loose. The first thing that set it all off was the sound of exploding glass. One of the windows had been blown out by some unseen force. People started screaming. After that, everything happened so quickly. But what I saw will forever be scarred into my retina. Something, I can't describe exactly what, reached in and grabbed Chrissy. In horror, I watched as she, kicking and screaming, was being dragged through the broken window. Some of the adults rushed to rescue her, but they froze in their tracks the second a disfigured appendage slithered into view. The limb, or whatever it was, started digging its way into Chrissy's throat, distorting her terrifying scream into something I couldn't possibly describe with words. There was nothing we could do other than witness her disappearing into the night. But the worst was yet to come. I had hoped that she had died, thus ending her suffering, but that thing wasn't done yet. A loud thud resonated as Chrissy was slammed against the roof, which was followed up by her agonizing screams for help. Somehow, she was still alive and breathing, but not for long. Once more, her shrieks became warped, more high-pitched, as if her vocal cords were being stretched. All the while this was going on, it sounded as if she was being skinned alive and gutted open like a fish, the wet sound of internal organs spilling out over the rooftop. It didn't take long after the scream had died down that another horrifying sound picked up, the scurrying off too many feet making its way towards the window, straight towards us. Poor, helpless Chrissy hadn't sated its appetite. No, its hunger was bottomless, and now it was on the hunt. With Caleb crying in my arms, I started making my way towards the first hiding spot that crossed my mind, the kitchen area and the rooms beyond. Since it was just the two of us, I decided that we could seek refuge in the bathroom. The storage and break room could house whoever else that managed to make it. The moment I closed the bathroom door, I locked it and sunk down to the floor with Caleb still clutching his arms and legs around me. While sitting there, I carefully clasped my shaking hands over his ears, trying to shield him from the mayhem outside. Beyond the thin, wooden bathroom door, chaos reigned. That abomination was slaughtering everything in its path. No one was spared, whether you were an adult or a child. God, the poor children. I can't even begin to, nor do I want to, describe what it sounded like. All the while, the massacre was being carried out. The music was still playing in the background, adding insult to the unspeakable bloodshed, and for a second it all felt like a sick joke, a farce played on humanity. How I wish that was true. But as soon as the sound of my boy crying and my own silent tears shortly followed, I was soon thrown back to the wolves. While silently hushing him and trying to remain composed, the stench of blood slowly started drifting in from underneath the door. At some point, I don't know when, everything is more or less a blur, Caleb finally got up on his feet. By now, things had quieted down. Even the music had stopped playing. Had the creature left, or was it still roaming around somewhere in the building? I sat still, watching Caleb as he inched his way slowly towards the door. Once there, he put his ear to it and listened. I got up too and stood next to him, pressing my ear to the door as well. Still quiet. I glanced at him, but before I could say that we were in the clear, I suddenly heard something out there. Movement. Something or someone was scuffling around. They were limping, staggering painlessly on the blood-covered tiles, while pushing its way through the debris of dead bodies. I swallowed hard, reaching my hand towards my boy, and just as my fingertips graced his shoulder, I heard a voice from the cafeteria, the voice of Amy. A cold shiver surged through me as Caleb opened his mouth. "Mom, we're in the bathroom!" Forcefully, I grabbed a hold of the collar of his costume and pulled him backwards, landing him hard on his tailbone. Then, I wrapped one arm around him while covering his mouth with my left hand. I could tell he was in pain, but this was not the time for tears. At first he put up a fight, wriggling around, but eventually I managed to calm him. That's when I heard that horrible thing, coming closer. It was as if it knew it had all the time in the world. From the sound of it, it was no longer bipedal. Instead, it seemed to crawl across the floor using multiple appendages, traversing the threshold into the kitchen area. At this point, I could feel that Caleb had soiled himself. Both our hearts were beating, almost in succession. I knew nothing of this thing, where it had come from and what it was capable of, but I prayed that it couldn't hear our heartbeats. It had stopped, and once it spoke using Amy's voice. "Caleb? Caleb! It's Mommy. Where are you? Mommy misses you so." This time, however, it sounded more hollow, as if the thing somehow knew that its prey was close by, and therefore it no longer needed to perfect its mimicry. Caleb did not notice as he yet tried to break away from my grasp. But yet again I managed to restrain him. Time dragged by. But eventually, the creature left the kitchen area. We were safe, for now. Before removing my hand, I whispered to Caleb that he had to be quiet and not so much as utter a peep. He nodded, to which I gingerly uncovered his mouth. Our eyes met. His were red from crying. As I was about to dry his wet cheeks, he suddenly whispered, "Why are we hiding from Mommy?" I swallowed hard, but the lump in my throat refused to go away. The day had finally come. Tears started to form in my eyes. God, it hurt so bad, but I couldn't keep it up anymore. I struggled to get the words out. That's not Mommy. She..." "But I heard her," Caleb protested. Caleb, he would hate me for the rest of his life. But it was worth it. It would be a hard blow. However, I was willing to do everything in my power to prevent that thing from ever toying with his feelings again. The lie had to die. Mom, she doesn't exist. She is not watching over us. She's gone. A part of me was ready to wrestle him down if he made it for the door. But he just looked at me, vacantly. It was as if the last glimmer of hope, that last light, died inside him. Then and there, I had murdered his mother and ripped her away from him. I hated myself. But then again, no amount of lying could protect us from that unspeakable thing that was still out there. Slowly, without even as much as sobbing, he shut his eyes and wordlessly crept into my arms. That must have been 3 or 4 hours ago. I don't know. Everything's a blur at this point. The batteries on my phone are almost dead, and I still can't seem to send messages or make calls. The stereo's stuck playing the same 5-second loop over and over. Sometimes I can make out faint voices in the distance. At times it reminds me of Sam and Alex. Other times Chrissy. Or Kelly. I think I even heard Nora at some point. I think it's experimenting, trying to figure out which disguise works to lure in prey. A while ago I heard it climbing around on the roof. Not sure if it's trying to find a way inside. Thankfully, the bathroom has no windows, only a small vent. Caleb is sleeping. It's almost as if he's entered some sort of catatonic state. He doesn't seem to react to anything outside the bathroom, not even the voice of his mother. I got no idea how big this is, but based on what I heard when I talked to Paul, there are possibly more of them. What even are they? Extraterrestrials? Demons? Something else entirely? And how the hell are they able to mimic our loved ones? It makes no sense. Whatever the case, no one has come to our aid. No police. No military. No nothing. It scares me to death thinking about it. But it feels as if we've been forgotten, abandoned. But who knows? Maybe the government has put our town under quarantine. I'm saying that because I thought I might have heard a helicopter at some point. I don't know. It's hard to tell what I'm hearing sometimes. Maybe I just imagined it. I'm so tired now. Think I'm going to try and sleep, or at least rest with one eye open. But truth to be told, I don't think we're going to make it, unless a miracle happens. Or if that thing returns, I hope it takes us in our sleep. Hopefully when we're both dreaming of Amy. That way, even if it is a dream, we would at least die together, as a family. Story 8. Camping Support Group. I want to start by saying, I am not in this story. I am a detective, and over the years I have come across a lot of stories. What I am about to post now is the best retelling of events I can write. 2 years back, while going through a storage unit, I found a GoPro once I had taken it home to watch. I quickly took it into the station after the first 10 minutes. I watched the rest of the video with a few others there, and after watching the video, we all got to work on trying to uncover what it was about. That is why I am here now. Maybe I can get help from someone here. So, here is what was on that video. Time 001. The video starts with a view of the ground before getting strapped onto the head of our POV. From now on. Mark, how does it look? He asked, looking around at 7 people in the woods around a campfire. Frank, you look stupid. Margaret, Frank, please try your best to be nice. She waved her hands to get everyone's attention. Margaret, now that we are all settled in and the fire is going, how about we all give our names and why we are here? Mark, how about you go first? And we go right from you. She sits down looking at Mark to start. Mark, sure. Hi, I'm Mark. I'm here to meet new people for the most part and become more social. He looks to his right, seeing a man who looks to be in his early 20s, looks to be around 6 feet tall, blonde short hair and muscular. Daniel, hello everyone. My name is Daniel and I have known Margaret for some time now. I like to help her whenever I can. That is why I am here now. Daniel looks around, smiling at everyone, as if he were excited to be there. Right of him was a man that also looked to be in his early to mid-20s. Long black hair, about 5-10 feet tall, and has a patchy beard. Frank, I'm Frank, he said with his arms crossed, looking into the fire. Mark looks at Margaret and back to Frank. Margaret, Frank, she said with care. Frank, I'm here to deal with my anger, he sighs while tapping his boot. To his right, a pale woman, perhaps younger than Daniel. She looked frail, maybe 5'5" in height and a bit on edge. Emma, I'm Emma, here to move on from the last 2 years. She looked at the ground, not wanting to make eye contact with anyone. Right of her was a large man. He was bald, had a big beard, maybe taller than Daniel, and a scar running from his left eye down to his neck. Frank, move on. That's it? I had to say the reason I'm here. He looks around, chuckling. Margaret, Frank, please. Don't push her. Daniel, yeah, dude. Be respectful and wait for everyone else to talk. Frank, of course, he makes a motion to zip his lips. Everyone sighs. Jacob, hello everyone. I'm Jacob. Happy to be here, of course. I've been off the alcohol for over a year now, thanks to Margaret. but this is my first time at a camp with a support group. Everyone claps and Frank scoffs. Right of him is a woman in her mid-40s or so, short black hair, 5'8", maybe 5'9", and both arms filled with tattoos. Mia. The name's Mia. I am here to work on myself. Give more and take less. She slightly shakes her head. Finally, the last person, a young man, around the age of Daniel or so, but much shorter. He had to be around 5'6" or so. Long, messy dark hair and no facial hair. Liam. Hey everyone. I'm Liam Sup. Margaret. No last names. Haha. I know you're new, but we don't do last names. Liam. Oh, sorry. I'm Liam. I'm here to, get out of the system and shit. Look for a job, maybe. It seemed like he didn't really know what the group was there for. Margaret. Great. So that is everyone. Thank you all again for coming here. I'm sure you will all get something from this that will change your life. Mark looks around at everyone, and Margaret suggests everyone talks to each other for a few minutes. Before anyone gets to any conversations, Mark turns the GoPro off. Time, 4:23. The video snaps back on. Chatter quietly dies down as Margaret stands up. Margaret, I'll be right back. She walks about 10 feet behind from where she was seated to the van they had come here in. Mark, anyone got any good scary stories to tell? He looks around at everyone. Daniel, yeah, I got a good one. It's about a group of people that go camping. Frank, yeah, we all know how this goes. Let me tell a scary fucking story. Daniel sighs and Frank stands up, looking at everyone. Frank begins telling the story as Margaret comes back from the van, with flashlights passing them on to everyone. Daniel moves his chair closer to Margaret and Mark, wanting to talk to them while Frank went on with his story. Daniel, it's good to see you in better spirits, Margaret. I know it's been a little hard for you after. Well, your husband left you, he says softly, and she nods. Margaret, yeah. Well, let's not talk about that right now, yeah? Daniel nods. Mark. Margaret and Daniel start to talk to each other while Frank continues his story. After about 2 minutes, Margaret gets everyone's attention. Frank, oh, what the hell? I was getting to the best part. Margaret, that's enough now. I want us all to now go on a scavenger hunt. You all have your flashlights and I set up flags not too far from here yesterday. You'll all be in pairs of 2. Sorry if you get paired with me, haha. Jacob, I don't really want to go walking in the woods just when it's already dark. Frank, did my story scare you? Jacob, no. I don't want to go looking for flags for who knows how long in the dark. I think it sounds fun. I could probably find more than everyone else. Emma, yeah. I also don't want to do this. Margaret, oh, I should have told you all first. That's on me, but a raise of hands for who does not want to. Everyone but Mark. Mai and Daniel put their hands up. Mark looks around at everyone as chatter starts to turn into arguing. 3 minutes of them all discussing the activity, what to do instead, and to maybe go to bed in the tents they had set up when they got here. Maybe all of them talking so loudly was the reason they didn't hear it coming. But I think Mark did, as he turned to look behind him a few times and to look in between the others. Then, Frank stops talking as he focuses on behind Margaret. The rest of the group slowly hear it too and sees what Frank does. Walking from behind Margaret was 5 people dressed in suits and wore blank white plastic masks. The masks looked cheap, but the suits looked extremely expensive, black with red stripes on the sleeves. Everyone fell silent as Margaret turned around to see the 5 people walk closer to her, passing her car. Now only a few feet away from Margaret, can the shapes of the 5 be fully seen? The one in the middle, tall and imposing, wore his suit jacket around his waist, wearing a white tank top. His arms muscular and full of scars. The other 4 were about 6 feet tall, looking heads and shoulders smaller than the man in the middle. Time 10:12. Frank, what the fuck do you all want, huh? Mark looks at Frank and at the others. I'm sure many thoughts are going through his head. Margaret turns to the group and back to the 5 men. Lives, said the tall man in a deep, muffled voice, before taking a machete from behind him, and in one quick, Swift swing. Margaret falls to the ground with her head flying from her body. Her head rolls to the fire pit, slowly catching on fire as her body goes limp. A silent horror falls on everyone as they look at each other in disbelief. The masked men don't move at all, just looking. Frank, fuck! Everyone.
Run with me!
He screams. Mark snaps his head around to see Frank running away from everyone else as they start to follow right behind him. Mark takes a few looks back as he runs to catch up with the others back at the 5 men. They remain in the same position, not moving at all. Frank, Daniel and Mai are the fastest as everyone is now reaching them, with Jacob only catching up after everyone else is already talking about what has just happened. Time 12:45. Frank, what the fuck? Daniel, just calm down. We must make a plan. Mai, yeah. Keep running in this direction. She points off into the wood as Mark catches his breath. The camera looks at the ground as Jacob can be heard panting heavily. Emma, and what is that way? Huh? Frank, the way that's away from those fucks. He nods at Mai. Mai, we have to keep going while we have this much distance on them. Daniel, no. There are others here that need help. He walks over to Liam, Jacob and Emma. Mark looks at Frank and Mai. Mark, yeah, we can't just leave them. Catching his breath and standing upright. Mai, I'm not dying because of some out-of-shape fucks. You with me, Frank? Frank looks at Mai and back to the group. Frank, I fucking hate that I'm about to say this, but we are better with the numbers. Mai says nothing as she runs into the woods with the flashlight she has until she cannot be seen anymore. Mark, from what I was able to see, they aren't following yet, or at least I didn't see them move when we took off. Daniel, okay. From now on, only one flashlight on at a time and we follow me. Can you 3 walk? He does his best to get Jacob, Liam, and Emma ready to go. Frank, no. We follow me. I'm not taking orders from a goody-goody. Daniel, we do not have the time to argue this. Who wants to follow me? Everyone raises their hands but Frank. Daniel, see, I'm leading. Liam, just wait. Hold on. This isn't adding up, you know. He stands up and starts pacing. Daniel, look. We can talk about this late. Liam, no. This is a setup. It has to be. Margaret said something like, this will change our life, and wanted us all to go in groups of 2 into the woods minutes before those crazy people showed up. Right? Everyone looks at each other. Daniel, I will not tolerate any slander on Margaret's name. Liam, yeah, you wouldn't, right? I overheard you talking about her husband leaving her. Why did he do that? Emma, wait, what? Jacob, I'm good to go now. We should leave. Frank, no. No, not yet. Frank steps in front of Daniel. So, Liam is bringing up some interesting points, wouldn't you say? Mark, I gotta say, it does sound weird when it's put like that. Daniel, no. What does that even mean? She got her head chopped off. What's the plane? Liam, suicide and wanted us all dead. Daniel, why? Why would she want us dead? I've known her for years, and she wouldn't do something that messed up. Liam, explain her weird-ass words and the timing. The sound of steps can be heard in the distance. Jacob, wait. You hear that? He moves his flashlight towards Mark. Frank, dude. Come here! Mark rushes over to them and turns his body to see the 5 men walking towards the group from about 20 feet away. The sounds of footsteps on sticks quiet the group. Mark looks at the group and waves his hands to get the others to start running. Making sure no one is left behind and the 5 men keep walking, slowing. The group stops for a moment to catch their breath. Time 17:28. A loud clap can be heard where the 5 men are following the sounds of sprinting. Quick stomps can now be heard in 5 different directions than dead silence. Frank, they are fucking with us. Daniel, and they split up. He runs his hands through his hair. Frank, dude, is that GoPro thing still on? How have you not tossed that thing? Mike, right. I forgot about it. Daniel, keep it on. It might be able to get one of their faces. or at least capture what happens to us. Liam, why do you have that thing anyway? Mark, oh shit. Everyone looks at Mark at once, I'm sure thinking he is seeing one of the men. Mark. Margaret and I had a talk before we came out. She wanted me to bring the GoPro to capture the trip and make a little film over the 2 days. Frank and Liam stare at Daniel. Emma, what the hell? Oh fuck. Liam is right, isn't he? Daniel, say something. He is just staring into the distance. Liam throws his arms into the air and walks around the group when loud metallic chomp can be heard, followed by the screams of Liam. The others rush to him and see he has gotten himself caught by a bear trap. Liam, fuck, get this fucking thing off me. Everyone tries to pull the trap open, but with no success. Daniel, come on everyone. Emma, shit. She lets go of the trap and falls backward. Mark looks at her, at the trap and back to her. She kicks her legs around, trying to get to her feet as everyone looks at her. Jacob, yo. Steps can be heard from behind them, and as Mark looks behind Jacob, one of the men dashes in with a knife and slashes at Jacob. He had put his arm up in time to protect his face from the knife. Daniel and Frank both let go of the trap to tackle the man when another man dashes in to dig his knife into Daniel's left leg. Mark watches as Liam is stuck in the trap. Jacob is now bleeding from his arm and his attacker now moving towards Frank, while Daniel pushes the man off him but doesn't pull the knife out. Daniel, Mark. The man that got pushed off Daniel gets up and starts slowing, backing up into the woods as the other man swings his knife at Frank. Mark and Daniel rush at the knife-swinging maniac. Daniel pushes Frank out of the way and tackles the man to the ground. Jacob now coming to had help with Mark to attack the man on the ground. Daniel, he is stabbing me.
Grab him!
Frank rushes in to help the other two in the attack. The three grab the man's arms and get the knife away from him while also stomping on him. Daniel, don't kill him. Just hold on to him. He stands up and holds his side, blood turning his right hand red. The three hold the man down as Frank grabs the knife that was at the man's side and starts to stab into his neck. Daniel, no. He coughs as Mark and Jacob both move away, and Frank keeps stabbing his neck. Frank, fuck you.
Fuck you. Fuck you!
Mark watches Frank hack away at his neck before his head is completely severed, still wearing that plastic mask. Liam, can you get me out? Daniel and Mark both turn to Liam, screaming for help. Mark, fuck, this is so bad. Daniel looks at the knife in his leg. Daniel, that's not good. Frank, shit. Is it deep? Daniel turns to Frank and shrugs his shoulders. Jacob, look dude, we couldn't get him out before. Frank and Daniel both turn their heads to see if they can find the other man that attacked them. Mark, looks like the other guy took off. Liam, hey,
this fucking trap!
He cries out in pain when footsteps are heard running at them. Mark turns around to see Emma. Frank, thanks for the fucking help. Emma, they could have fucking killed me. Frank, yeah.
No shit.
We could have died. If you run away again, don't you dare think of coming back. Frank rips up some of his shirt to give to Daniel to stop the bleeding from his side. Mark, wait a second. Take his mask off and I'll get it on the GoPro. Frank picks the man's head up and removes the mask. What's picked up on the video is shocking to say the least. The man's face looked like the skin on his face has been skinned off slowly over a few months, giving his face an almost burnt-like look. A shade of light reddish brown. No hair anywhere on his face. Nothing to identify. Frank, what the hell? People don't just look like that. Mark, why not? If you passed him on the street, he would just look like someone that has been in an accident. Daniel looks at the face with concern. Daniel, in him was life, and that life was the darkness in mankind. Daniel closes his eyes for a moment. Emma, can we leave now? Liam, not without me you aren't. Time 25:39. With a lot of effort, they free Liam's leg and Frank carries him, with the knife now out of Daniel's leg and pieces of shirt wrapped around to slow the bleeding. Footsteps can be heard all around them, but nothing is done in this time. Jacob, they are just letting us walk to mess with our heads. Frank, yeah, these sick fucks must be enjoying it. How you holding up, Daniel? Daniel, yeah, I'm good. Mark looks around and hears sounds, steps and sticks breaking. Emma, there is not a chance they let us leave, right? Mark, well, we got one of them. Maybe we can fight them off. Jacob, at least only 2 of them jumped us, right? And 1 ran off for some reason. Emma, yeah. Frank, so, tell us about your past, Emma, before we all die, haha. Emma, you are annoying, but I was an escort. Frank, your price is cheap. Emma, too expensive for you. Everyone laughs. Daniel, hey Liam, you still with us? Frank, Liam? They all stop for a moment to make sure he is still breathing. Frank, shit. He passed out. Frank puts him down against a tree. Frank, my fucking arm is killing me. With no sound as a warning, an arrow pins Liam's head to the tree he is resting on. Everyone starts to look around to see where that arrow came from. Mark points his flashlight at one of the men holding a small bow. Mark, shit, look at that fucker just standing there. Come here, you piece of shit. Daniel, Mark, stop. We got to just keep moving. The man takes aim and shots another arrow into Liam's head. Emma, he is playing with us. She runs to Frank and Daniel. Jacob, we have to leave now. Mark, damn it. Mark follows behind them as they walk a bit faster. They walk until they come across a steep hill. Frank, God, I hate these woods. Before they start to walk up the hill, one of the men are only a few feet away from them to the left. He is holding a large knife and watching the group. Frank, come on. I killed one of you already. He holds the knife up. Mark gets close to Frank as they are both in front of Emma. Jacob and Daniel now. Fast steps can be heard from behind the man coming down the hill. Emma, you guys hear something? Mia. Ah! Mia comes rushing behind the man with a rock flying down the hill. He turned to her just to see how he was going to die. Her body slams into his, pushing him violently to the ground. What? Said the whole group as they now watch Mia slam the rock into the man's mask, breaking it and caving his face into a brutal mess. She grunts and doesn't stop for a full minute. Frank. Hey, the dude is dead also. Where the fuck did you come from? Mia. Up from the hill. She points from behind her. I've been keeping close but far from those masked weirdos. Daniel. What? Why? You could have helped us earlier. The group look at each other and at Mia as she starts to walk up the hill. Mia. We should get going up here. Frank. Answer Daniel. You have been close and not helping until now. They all start to follow her up the hill. Mia. Yes. I'm looking out for myself. Not taking any chances. Frank. That's so fucked up. But I understand. Time 39:23. Frank. That hill sucked. They get to the stop and rest for a moment. Daniel. Oh, come on. Everyone, look. He points down the hill. The 3 remaining men are at the bottom of the hill, looking up to the group. Frank. Look at that big cunt. He spits. Mark falls to the ground and just sits there looking at others. Jacob catches his breath and stands near Mia. Mia. Yeah. Just keep an eye on them. We'll make a run for it if they start walking up here. Emma walks to Mia. Mark. So Daniel, have you put more thought into what Liam said? Daniel. Yeah. Frank. And? Daniel takes a deep breath and sighs. Daniel. I don't think she has anything to do with this. I can't see her doing something this horrible. Mark. Okay. I guess it doesn't matter right now anyway. But can you tell us about what happened with her husband? Daniel. Sure. He left her for her younger sister. She is a successful doctor, attractive and smart. Margaret has always had something against her sister, thinking she had it easier. That doesn't mean she would do anything like this to people she is trying to help. Frank. Maybe she needed help. There's a moment of silence. Frank. Anyway, looks like they aren't moving for as long as we are looking at them. Another game, I'm sure. Daniel. Most likely. I just keep thinking if I could have helped a little more. Frank. Dude, there's nothing else we could have done. It's just fucked. That's all. Daniel. Well, maybe we should have all attacked them the moment they arrived. Better chance of killing them, maybe. There is no way we can take them all on now with how we are. Frank, killing them. You sound different from before. Daniel, they are monsters. Frank, worse. They are man. Daniel, Frank, I hope you can move from your anger. God will forgive you. Frank said nothing and just looked at Daniel. Frank, so, think there's an afterlife? Daniel, yeah. Frank, I hope so. Frank sighed and grabbed Daniel, pushing him. Daniel, what are you doing? Frank, everyone run. Frank jumps down the hill towards the men. Mark stands up and looks at the girls and back to Daniel. Mark, shit. He just took off. Daniel, we gotta go. He is giving us time. Mark helps Daniel move as fast as he can. Emma and Mia ran, but not too far ahead. Jacob, shit. I can't keep running. Jacob can barely run at this point. Daniel, Mark, go help Jacob. I'll be fine. Mark nods and runs to Jacob to help. Mark, I got you, man. But we gotta move as fast as you can. Mark puts an arm around Jacob. Jacob, I'm so sorry. He has while panting heavily. Emma and Mia are far ahead of the group. Mark helping Jacob and Daniel being close to them. The woods are dark and thick with trees. The sounds of bugs and animals can be heard faintly. Time 48:21. Mia, hurry up. She shouts at the three that are now far behind. Mark, they are going to leave us at this rate. Jacob, you and Daniel really should leave me. Daniel, not happening. He moves closer to them. Jacob, I'm slowing you guys down. The girls are so far, and we shouldn't be split up like this. He moves Mark's arm and gives him a little push. Mark, we still aren't leaving you. They start to jog a little. Emma and Mia come back to the group. Mia, if you want to live, maybe run faster. Emma, we can't let them catch up to us or find out where we are. Jacob, maybe we should all split up and run in a different direction to the others. Emma, that's not a bad idea. Daniel, no. We just need to keep. He falls to the ground and grabs his leg. Mark, shit. Dude, you've lost a lot of blood. Daniel, I'm good. He stands back up and grunts. Mark, Mia, can you help, please? Mia, no. Emma sighs and walks to Daniel, helping him move. Daniel, thank you, Emma. They start moving again. Mark, hey, Jacob. If it's okay to ask, but how did you get that scar? Jacob, well, I got it in a car accident. One night coming home from drinking. A lot. He puts his finger on his eye and runs it down to his neck. Got this. Survived and stopped drinking from that day on. Mark, what about you, Mia? Got anything you want to get off your mind? She turns her head to Mark and back. Jacob, guess not, haha. Daniel sighs and whispers something to Emma, but it can't be heard. Emma leaves Daniel and steps quickly towards Mia. Jacob, we still can split up. Make it hard for those crazy people. Daniel, it seems like they know these woods. I don't think it would really do anything. Mark, yeah, they are probably not too far behind us. Jacob, or maybe Frank killed them all for us. Daniel stops for a second but keeps walking. Daniel, he didn't have to do that, but I hope he managed to get away from them. Jacob, yeah, I would have liked to hear the rest of that scary story. The three share a quiet laugh. Mark turns his head, to the left to see nothing and to the right. He stops and Jacob looks at him. Daniel, you too? He stops and turns to Mark. Mark, there. He points into the woods and a white mask can be seen. Mark turns his flashlight on and sure enough, the man with the bow can be seen about 20 feet away or so. Jacob, oh fuck off. Daniel, I guess they have been following us this whole time. He takes a deep breath and sighs. The two girls now come walking back to the group. Mia, you guys want to stop every 2 damn seconds? Emma, yeah, come on. They both look in the same direction. Mia, shit. Well, are we just going to keep looking at him or what? Mark, wait. If there's one there. Mark starts to look around, and the other very tall man can be seen from about 20 feet behind them. Mark, well, that's two. Mark turns to both masked men one at a time. Daniel, they aren't moving, but shouldn't there be a third? Mia, Frank might have got one of them. Jacob, or he got away, and he is getting followed by the third one. Mark, enough running. Mia, are you serious? Mark, with only two left. Yeah. Daniel, I'm still bleeding out, so I don't know how much I can help. He coughs. Jacko, yeah, I'm in. Emma quietly gets close to Mia. Mark, come here. Mark waves his hands at the two masked men. The one with the bow starts to walk over to the group. Mark, get ready, everyone. The group moves closely together. The man now about 6 or 7 feet away. He tosses his bow and one arrow to the group. Mark dashes to the bow and arrow, picking them up and taking aim. Mark releases the arrow and doesn't come close to hitting the man. Everyone yells at him. Mark, damn! The man reaches his hand out as if Mark would nicely place it, but in his hand. Mark tosses it back to him. As the group backs up a little, the other masked man can no longer be seen. Mia, if he comes any closer, we jump him and follow me. The man puts his left arm behind his back, then in front of his face, and repeats this motion 2 more times. He shrugs and puts the bow around his torso and pulls a knife from his back. Jacob, let's just rush him now. He turns to Mark. Mia, fuck it. She runs to the man, followed by Mark and Jacob behind him. The sound of someone behind them falling over can be heard. Emma, I got you, Daniel. Mark is in front of the man, Jacob on his left and Mia on his right. He swings his knife left and right as he takes steps towards Mark. Jacob moves in and gets his right arm cut. Jacob, shit. Jacob wraps his arms around the man's waist. Mia and Mark rush in as Mark tries to grab the hand with the knife, but a few stabs quickly hit Jacob's back. They push him and get him to the ground with Jacob now on top of him. Grunts from the man can be heard as he gets a few more stabs into Jacob. Mark, I got his arm. Mark holds the arm with the knife as Mia starts punching the man's face. Jacob starts bleeding from his neck onto the man. His left arm grabs Jacob's face. The GoPro can't pick it up, but Jacob yells in pain and covers his face with his hands. The man thrashes around and with Jacob falling towards Mia. She moves for only seconds, but he gets free. He overpowers Mark and gets on top of him. The GoPro now looking up to the man as he raises his hand up, and just before he can slam it down. Daniel tackles the man. Emma helps Mark up, and they see the struggle between Daniel and the man. Mia gets to them before Mark, helping get the knife off him as Mia starts to stab the man. Daniel stumbles off the man as Mia stabs away at his neck, face and torso. He grunts as he gets stabbed and soft moans can be heard. Mia, let's see what he has on him. She pants as she looks in the pockets of his jacket and pants. Mark, Daniel, thank you. Mark helps him up as he coughs. Daniel nods and Mark looks at Mia as she pulls a wallet from his jacket pocket. Mia, what? She throws money from the wallet and it's just Monopoly money. She empties the wallet and nothing else is in it. Mark, that's just... I don't even know what to say to that. Mia looks at Mark and over to Jacob. Sounds of flesh can be heard getting hacked at. Mark turns around and so do the others. No, yells Mark and Daniel, the tall man chopping into his lifeless body with the machete. The tall man is now looking at the group, breathing heavily over Jacob's body. He takes one step towards the group and Mark flinches. The tall man pulls his arm back and throws the machete. The sound of it hitting something can be heard. Mark turns around to see Emma with the machete in her head and her body twitching on the ground. Mia runs towards him with knife in hand. The tall man grabs Mia and with one hand around her neck, he lifts her up from the ground. She swings the knife, cutting his arm and chest before he grabs her hand with the knife. Daniel rushes over, but he is kicked in the chest and falls to the ground. He rolls on the ground and moans faintly. Mark, shit. No, this is so bad. Mark runs to Daniel and gets him up on his feet. The GoPro now seeing the tall man up close. He looks down at Mark as Mia can be heard gasping for air and kicking around. Mia, I'm so sorry, Mia. Getting Daniel up and helping him move. Daniel, we can't leave her. He coughs. Mark takes a few looks back to the tall man just watching them leave. Tank top now having blood on it and Mia dead at his feet. Time 55:10. Daniel, Mark, stop. Just stop. Mark, no, we gotta keep going. We can't stop. Daniel trips over and Mark quickly tries to pick him up. Daniel, I've lost too much blood. Mark, you can keep going. I know it. Daniel, no. He gets up. You run. And you don't turn back. He points behind Mark. Mark, Daniel pushes Mark lightly. Daniel, get out of here. Mark backs up and footsteps can be heard deep in the woods. Mark, I'll make sure I get out of here. Daniel, please do. Daniel gives him a thumbs up and Mark starts to run in the other direction. The minutes that follow are of Mark panting heavily as he runs deeper into the woods. Time 59:99. The video ends. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.